Hi, my name is Giselle, and my sister-in-law broke into my house, took my $10,000 wedding dress, the one my mother left me before she died, and wore it as a Halloween costume. She brought it back stuffed in a plastic shopping bag, soaked, torn, stinking of cheap wine. They all said I was overreacting, my husband, his family. They called it just a dress. But when did just a dress become permission to trample over someone's memory? Why did everyone else get to laugh, while I was the only one grieving? And when I finally stood up for myself, why did that make me the villain? Would you have stayed quiet? It was supposed to be a quiet Monday, one of those days where the stillness wraps around you like a favorite blanket. Gideon had left early for a project site 2 towns over, and I had the whole house to myself. No phone calls, no meetings. Just the rhythm of soft laundry spinning in the dryer, the smell of eucalyptus candles drifting through the hallway, and the golden light of late afternoon warming up the hardwood floors of our old Savannah home. I was folding towels in the living room when I remembered the garment bag. The gown. I had planned to take it out that evening, just to air it before the anniversary photo shoot next weekend. That dress wasn't just a dress. It was my mother's wedding gown, carefully restitched, reshaped, re-loved into something new for me. I had worn it once, on the day Gideon and I set our vows under a canopy of moss-covered oaks. After that, I'd kept it safely stored, away from sunlight and hands. I made my way upstairs, humming a little, still cradling a stack of folded pillowcases. When I opened the guest room closet to tuck them away, the garment bag was gone. I stared at the empty rod for longer than I should have, blinking, as if it might reappear if I focused hard enough. Maybe I had moved it. Maybe Gideon had taken it to get it pressed without telling me. I dropped the pillowcases onto the bed and checked our bedroom closet. Nothing. The linen closet? Empty. I opened the trunk at the foot of our bed. No dress. My stomach began to twist slowly, coiling inward. I checked the hallway closet, the laundry room, the attic stairs. I even opened the basement door and peered down, though I hadn't touched that place in months. It wasn't there. Sweat prickled behind my ears. I retraced my steps, trying to remember the last time I saw it. I knew exactly where I left it. That specific corner of the guest room closet, wrapped in its ivory bag with gold script from the boutique. I had zipped it up myself after the wedding. I hadn't touched it since. That dress was worth $10,000, monetarily, yes, but sentimentally, it was priceless. A legacy of lace passed through 3 generations. I took a slow breath and pulled out my phone. I called Gideon, straight to voicemail. He rarely picked up when he was on site, but this time I left a message. Hey, it's me. Quick question. Did you, by any chance, move my wedding dress? No answer. I stood frozen in the doorway of the guest room, thoughts racing faster than I could catch them. The only other person who had access to our house, besides me and Gideon, was Callista Vexley, my husband's little sister. 23, charming, reckless. She had a key for emergencies, though the definition of emergency had stretched over time to include crashing on our couch after parties, borrowing shoes, using our guest bathroom because campus bathrooms are disgusting. I didn't mind, at least I hadn't, until now. A memory surfaced, Callista borrowing my vintage silk scarf for a photo shoot and returning it stained with bronzer. Oops, she had said. You can barely see it, though. I felt a jolt of dread slide through me. Could she have? No, she wouldn't. But the door hadn't been tampered with. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, just an empty hanger where my wedding dress should have been. I walked slowly into the guest room, eyes scanning every inch. That's when I saw it. Just below the closet threshold, on the polished floorboard, 3 small droplets of deep burgundy. Wine? I knelt, sniffed the spot. Definitely red wine. I turned slowly, and my eyes landed on the vanity mirror across the room. A faint smudge of lipstick, Callista's signature mauve, curved on the bottom corner like a half-finished smile. A detail so minor, yet completely damning. It wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a cleaning crew error or a miscommunication. Someone had been in my room, in my closet, wearing that dress. My hands started to tremble. Not from fear, no, this wasn't fear. It was something colder, more brittle, the sensation of something sacred being defiled without apology. I didn't cry. Not then. I reached for my phone again and scrolled down to Callista's name. My thumb hovered over it, but I couldn't bring myself to hit call. What would I say? What if she denied it? Worse, what if she laughed? The room spun just slightly as my body caught up to what my brain already knew. The dress was gone. Not lost, not misplaced, taken. And the only person arrogant enough to believe she could get away with it was the same one who once said, "Your taste is too elegant for casual wear, but I'd totally rock it for fun." I stood in that room, the air heavy with perfume and betrayal, and whispered aloud, "Don't let this be what I think it is." I sat at the edge of the bed in the guest room, still gripping my phone, Callista's name glowing on the screen. The sun had dipped behind the Spanish moss outside, and the orange light in the room faded into gray. I didn't press the call button. I couldn't. Instead, I sent her a simple text. "Do you have my dress?" Nothing. I stared at the message for a moment, watching the read receipt flicker on, then off. She'd seen it. She just didn't care enough to respond. I felt something hollow stretch inside me, like a rubber band pulled too far, one more tug away from snapping. I texted again. "Callista, answer me." Still nothing. The hallway clock ticked louder than usual. I paced back and forth, trying to slow my breathing, trying not to imagine the worst, though it was already too late for that. My gut knew the answer. My gut had known the moment I saw that lipstick on the mirror. The front door clicked open just as I reached the bottom step. Gideon stepped inside, unwrapping his scarf and setting down his keys with that same casual rhythm he always used when he thought life was predictable. "Hey, babe," he called out, shrugging off his coat. "Everything all right?" "No." My voice came out flatter than I intended. "It's not." He looked up. "What's going on?" I crossed my arms, heat rising in my chest. "Where's my wedding dress?" His brows drew together. "What? Why would I know?" "Because it's gone, Gideon. It's not in the closet. It's not anywhere." He blinked. "You sure you didn't move it?" I gave him a look that cut right through the question. "I know exactly where I left it." He held up his hands like I'd accused him of arson. Okay, calm down." I hated that. "Don't tell me to calm down." He let out a sigh and headed toward the kitchen. "Maybe Callista stopped by." Exactly what I was thinking. I followed him. "She hasn't answered my texts. I think she took it." He paused mid-reach for the refrigerator handle. "Why would she take your wedding dress? Why did she take my scarf last year? Or your mom's pearls for that party? You think she wouldn't do it again?" He didn't answer, just rubbed his forehead like this conversation was giving him a headache instead of giving me a full-body breakdown. Before I could say anything else, we heard it. A car pulling into the driveway. Tires grinding against the gravel in that careless way Callista always drove. I moved to the window and peered through the curtains. There it was. Her beat-up red Civic, dented on the passenger side, windows down even though it was cold out. She didn't even knock. The front door opened like she lived here. Like she hadn't just ghosted me all day. "Hi," she called cheerfully, her voice bouncing through the hallway. "I brought it back." I froze. Gideon stepped back into the room, but I didn't move. Callista walked in like she was returning a blender. She held a wrinkled, damp plastic Target bag in one hand, swinging it slightly as if it weighed nothing. "Here you go," she chirped. My heart stopped. She placed the bag on the kitchen counter with zero ceremony. I approached it slowly, like it might contain something radioactive. My fingers hesitated at the handles, then pulled the plastic apart. The first thing that hit me wasn't the sight. It was the smell. Cheap wine, stale perfume, smoke. The scent clawed at my throat before I even laid eyes on what was inside. The dress, what used to be my mother's wedding gown, was crumpled, soaked, twisted like a used tablecloth. The lace was torn along the hem. A deep red stain bled through the midsection, almost black under the kitchen light. Sequins clung to the bag like they'd tried to escape. My hand shook as I pulled part of it out. The silk clung to itself, warped and puckered, as if it had been dragged through a storm drain. I looked up. Callista was texting. My voice cracked. What did you do? She glanced up, unfazed. What? Oh, yeah. Some girl spilled a drink on me, and I think I caught the hem on a table leg or something, but I didn't mean to, ruin it or whatever. You wore it? Well, yeah. I needed something for the costume thing. My mouth went dry. You wore my wedding gown, my mother's dress. She blinked. I didn't know it was that one. It was in a bridal bag, in a closed closet. She shrugged. It looked old. I thought it was vintage or something you didn't care about. I looked to Gideon, waiting for him to say something, anything. He opened his mouth and closed it. I turned back to her. That was the most important thing I owned. You're being super dramatic, she said, folding her arms. It's just a dress. No, it's not. My voice dropped. It was the dress my mother gave me before she passed. It's the dress I wore the day I promised your brother I'd stand beside him, and you turned it into a bar prop. She rolled her eyes. Okay, now you're making me feel bad. You should. I said I didn't know. But you didn't ask either. She huffed. You always act like everything has to be sacred. Not everyone's that uptight, Giselle. I took one step closer. Get out. Are you serious? Out of my house. Her mouth opened again, but Gideon finally spoke. Callista, just give her some space, all right? She stared at him, lips parted in disbelief. You're taking her side? I'm not taking sides. I'm asking you to leave. Callista shook her head, swiping her bag off the counter. This is ridiculous. She stormed out the front door, slamming it hard enough to rattle the glass. I stood there for a moment, staring at the bag still on the counter, unable to move. My chest ached, not from anger anymore, but from something far more bitter. I picked up the dress, still dripping, and carried it to the staircase. I sat on the bottom step, the wet fabric pooled in my lap. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock. And then, barely a whisper, I heard myself say, I should have locked that damn closet. The light through the kitchen window was already harsh by the time I opened my eyes. I hadn't made it upstairs the night before. Instead, I had fallen asleep curled on the living room couch, the ruined gown still lying in a pile on the ottoman like a wounded animal. Its scent had seeped into the air, cheap liquor and something synthetic, clinging to the walls as if daring me to forget. I sat up slowly. My back ached from the awkward position I'd slept in, and my neck protested every movement. I pulled the Afghan off my shoulders and set it aside, forcing myself upright. The kitchen was quiet, too quiet. The coffee pot sat untouched on the counter. Normally, I would have heard Gideon's footsteps by now, the clink of a spoon stirring sugar, maybe even his usual whistle. But there was nothing. Just the ticking of the wall clock and the soft hum of the fridge. I tried to eat, scrambled some eggs out of routine more than hunger, but I couldn't bring myself to swallow more than 2 bites. Every part of me felt clenched, coiled, like my body was waiting for something, but didn't know what. The dress was still on the ottoman when I passed it again, the bottom layer trailing onto the rug. I couldn't bring myself to fold it. Couldn't bring myself to put it away. Every time I looked at it, all I saw was my mother's face the day she gave it to me. It's yours now, she'd said, her voice warm and scratchy from age. Not just for your wedding, but for every strength you carry from this day forward. She had worn that dress when she married my father under the courthouse tree. My grandmother wore it too, decades earlier, in a small chapel upstate. 3 generations of women, all in the same silk and lace, all believing in love enough to pass something so fragile between them. And when my mother gifted it to me, she hadn't known she'd be gone within the year, but I think she sensed it. She had handed me a letter with the gown, folded carefully into a blue envelope. I'm giving you this not for a wedding, it said, but for the woman you're becoming. May this dress never just be fabric to you, but the thread that reminds you who you are, even when others try to undo it. I hadn't read that letter in a long time, but it played in my head now, word for word. I didn't cry, not yet. I heard the shower upstairs. Gideon was awake. I stood by the kitchen island, arms crossed, waiting for him to come down. Maybe he would say something. Maybe now, after seeing what his sister had done, he would say something meaningful. An apology. A plan. Something. He appeared in the doorway 15 minutes later, hair damp, a travel mug in hand. He was dressed for the office. His eyes met mine. "Morning," he said. No pause, no question. He didn't look at the dress. Morning," I answered, quieter than I meant. He moved to the fridge, took out the orange juice, poured it into a glass. The silence was thick. "You saw it," I said finally. "You saw what she did." He kept his back to me. "I did." "You saw the condition it's in." He nodded. "You saw her face, her tone, me." He set the glass down, took a sip of coffee. "She didn't mean to destroy it." I stared at him, stunned. "That was the most sacred thing I owned, Gideon." He exhaled, leaning against the counter like this conversation exhausted him. "It's just a dress, Giselle. I know it meant a lot, but you're acting like it's a person." I felt my chest go tight. It was a piece of my mother, a piece of me, and she wore it like a joke. "You're overreacting." That was it. The thread snapped. I turned and walked away, my bare feet silent on the hardwood, but my rage echoed in every step. I didn't go far, just into my home office, but it felt like miles. Like stepping into a different world where my feelings mattered and my voice wasn't muted under the weight of Gideon's passive indifference. I sat at my desk, hands folded. For a few minutes, I stared at the blank notepad in front of me. Then I began to write. I didn't filter it. I wrote exactly what I remembered from last night. The way Callista smirked, the sound of the Target bag hitting the counter, Gideon's silence, the way my hands shook when I touched the dress. Then I made a second column, labeled it emotions, grief, violation, disgust, isolation. I circled the last word twice. Then I leaned back and looked around my office. The bookshelf, still full of volumes my mother once owned. The photos on the wall, one of me and Gideon on our wedding day. Another of my mother and I, arms linked, smiling in a way I hadn't done in months. My eyes drifted to the closet door. I stood, walked to it slowly, and opened it. It was neat, predictable, my scarves, my blazers, a few pairs of shoes in their boxes, nothing out of place, but it still made my skin crawl. The idea that someone in this house thought it was okay to treat my space, my things, like they didn't matter. I closed the door gently and rested my palm against it. That's when it hit me. They hadn't just damaged the dress. They had trampled over my memories, my history, my trust, and not one person in that house seemed to care enough to stand beside me. I spoke aloud, barely above a whisper. They didn't just ruin my dress. They ruined the last piece of her I had left. After I whispered those words into the dim silence of my office, I sat there for a while, staring out the window. The sky had already turned a dull, overcast gray, mirroring the numb fog in my chest. My thoughts ran in quiet circles, looping between anger, grief, and a strange kind of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. The house was silent again. Gideon had left for work without another word. I didn't follow him to the door. I didn't want to. Around noon, I made a sandwich I didn't eat and poured a glass of iced tea. I let sweat onto the counter. I picked up my phone to scroll, distract, escape. That's when the text came in. "Gideon, Mom wants to talk. She's inviting us all over tonight. 6 p.m., just dinner, family stuff." I stared at the screen, reread the words. My stomach turned. Family stuff. That was code. In the Rourke house, family stuff meant intervention disguised as politeness. It meant eyes across a table, mouths smiling too tight, and a script that everyone but me had already rehearsed. Still, I typed back, "Fine." Then I stood up, walked to the hallway mirror, and looked myself dead in the eye. "They think they're going to fix me," I muttered, "but I'm not the one broken." By the time we pulled into his parents' long driveway, the sun had dipped behind the trees. Golden hour had cast long shadows across the white brick of their colonial-style home, warm and soft, deceiving. Gideon parked the car and turned to me. "Let's just keep it civil, okay?" I didn't answer. My jaw stayed clenched. Inside, the dining room was already set, linen napkins folded just right, candles lit. The table stretched too long, too formal for what was supposed to be just dinner. Callista was already there, perched at the far end like she owned the evening. Her hair was curled, her blouse spotless. She was sipping lemonade through a glass straw, scrolling her phone like nothing had ever happened. Mrs. Rourke came up to greet us. "Giselle," she said with that same saccharine smile she'd perfected for guests and appearances. "We're so glad you could make it, dear." I nodded. "Of course." We sat down. Small talk murmured through the room like static, meaningless, constant, grating. I stared at the untouched salad in front of me, the glass of white wine I wouldn't drink. Finally, Mrs. Rourke cleared her throat and folded her hands. "So, Callista's told us about what happened." I tilted my head slightly. "Which part?" She hesitated, just a flicker. "About the dress. The dress she stole." Her lips tightened. She didn't realize it was important. It was a mistake. I let that hang in the air for a moment, then said calmly, "That gown was my mother's. It's been in my family for 3 generations." She didn't know that, Giselle. She didn't ask. Callista, who hadn't looked up once, finally said, "It was hanging in a guest closet like some old costume. How was I supposed to know it was the holy grail of dresses?" I leaned forward. "You opened a closet that wasn't yours, took something that wasn't yours, wore it, ruined it. And you think I'm being unreasonable for caring?" Callista rolled her eyes. "You're acting like I set the house on fire." "It might have been easier to replace the house," I shot back. "All right," Gideon said, holding up a hand. "Let's not turn this into a full-blown crisis." My eyes snapped to him. "It already is, and you're still minimizing it." He shrugged, exasperated. "It's just a dress, Giselle. You've said it yourself. It's a symbol. That's not the same as it being irreplaceable." It was irreplaceable. A murmur of agreement floated from his aunt at the end of the table. His cousin leaned over to whisper something to her boyfriend, and they both smirked. I felt like I was on a stage, naked under the lights, being told the show must go on, even as everything collapsed around me. I pushed my chair back slightly, not to stand, but just to breathe. "Do you know what it's like?" I said, eyes sweeping the table. "To be robbed by someone you had dinner with last week? Someone who smiled at you, called you sis, and then treated your most sacred thing like a party joke?" No one answered. "I do," I said. "And I'm sitting at a table full of people pretending that's okay." Mrs. Rourke reached for her wine glass. "We just want peace, Giselle. This kind of tension isn't healthy. Tension isn't caused by me asking for basic respect. You're making it harder than it needs to be." "No," I said. "You are." I looked at Gideon. "You all are." No one touched their food. No one defended me. No one even looked uncomfortable enough to suggest shame. Just stiff, practiced indifference. I scanned their faces one last time and realized something clicked inside me. Quietly, permanently. These weren't my people. They never had been. I stood. No chair scrape, just a soft motion. I didn't slam anything, didn't curse or cry. I just picked up my purse and nodded once. "Thank you for dinner," I said, "but I don't need to sit here and be gaslit into thinking I'm unreasonable." As I walked out, I could feel Gideon watching me. He didn't follow. The air outside was cold against my cheeks. I walked slowly down the driveway, heels clicking against the concrete, breath sharp in my lungs. Inside the car, I sat for a moment before reaching for my phone. I typed a message to my friend Elena. "Tell me I'm not crazy." I waited. A few seconds passed. Then a minute. No dots. No reply. I stared at the screen a little longer, then hit delete. Driving home, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat in that silence, letting it settle into my bones like a new kind of armor. Later that night, I walked back into the guest room. The dress was still there, untouched from the last time I'd looked at it, a shell of what it used to be. I stood over it, arms folded, thinking about everything they said. "Just a dress. You're overreacting. We want peace." If they won't listen, I whispered to the shadows, they'll feel it. The next morning, I moved through the house like I was made of glass. Every step felt too loud, too solid for how hollow I'd become inside. After the dinner at his parents' place, Gideon hadn't said much. We rode home in silence, and by the time we pulled into the driveway, he was already halfway up the stairs before I'd even closed the car door. I didn't follow him. I stayed in the kitchen, rinsed a cup that didn't need cleaning, stared at the light over the sink. I didn't sleep well. By the time the sun came through the blinds, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, still in yesterday's jeans. The dress was draped across the back of a chair like a ghost I hadn't invited. I couldn't shake the feeling that all of this, wasn't just thoughtless. Callista had always been careless, sure. But this felt targeted, intentional. And then I remembered something. About 6 months ago, after a minor scare where someone tried to break into our garage, Gideon had installed a basic security camera. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a discreet little black thing tucked in the corner of the front hall, aimed at the main hallway and guest room door. He'd set it up, tested it, and promptly forgotten about it. But I hadn't. I got up from the table, walked into the hall, and opened the closet where we kept the home network stuff. The camera's small receiver sat on the top shelf. I grabbed it, took it into my office, and connected it to my computer. The footage loaded slowly. I scrubbed through the file from 2 days ago, fast-forwarding through hours of nothing, sunlight moving across the walls, dust dancing in the air, empty space. Until suddenly, there she was. Callista. Just past 3 p.m. She let herself in through the front door, like she was walking into her own apartment. She didn't knock. She didn't text. She barely glanced around. I watched in stunned silence as she tossed her purse onto the table, took off her sunglasses, and walked straight to the guest room. She opened the closet, found the garment bag, unzipped it, and smiled. Not just smiled, smirked. She pulled the gown out, held it against her frame, and then, God help me, she pointed her phone at the mirror and snapped a selfie. Then she twirled in it, spun around in my hallway. She poured herself a glass of wine from the fridge, my fridge, and toasted herself in the mirror. And then, the final insult, she turned toward the camera, lifted her glass, and flipped it off. That was the moment something in me went still. I sat back in my chair, watching the screen replay again and again. I felt sick. I felt vindicated. I felt cold. I downloaded the footage, twice. One on a flash drive I kept in my jewelry box, the other on a password-protected cloud drive, just in case. That evening, after Gideon got home, I waited until he was out of his coat and settled in his office with a beer before I walked in. "Got a second?" I asked. He nodded without looking up from his screen. "Yeah, what's up?" I handed him the flash drive. "Watch that." He gave me a look. "What is it?" "Just watch it." He plugged it in, clicked the file, and for the next 5 minutes, he said nothing. The video played silently. Callista's smug little entrance, her dance with the gown, the toast, the gesture. By the time it ended, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his jaw. "Well," he said slowly, "that doesn't look great." I folded my arms. "Still just a dress?" He exhaled. "She's immature. I'm sure she didn't think it through." I cut him off. Don't make excuses for her again." He looked at me, startled. I held my ground. "If all of this, still isn't enough for you to take a stand, then I'm not sure what we're doing here." Gideon didn't answer. "You have 48 hours to talk to your sister. Really talk. And if she doesn't fix this, I will." He blinked. "Fix it how?" "I'll let her know exactly what consequences feel like." Then I walked out before he could ask anything else. Less than 24 hours later, I got a text from Callista. "Callista, I found this amazing bridal rental shop. I'll rent you a new gown. Modern, actually flattering." There was a photo attached. Some cheap satin thing, strapless, too short, hanging on a clearance rack. The rage bubbled up so fast I almost couldn't think straight. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at her message. That smug, performative tone, like she was doing me a favor. I typed back one sentence. "Me, You will regret underestimating me. No emojis, no punctuation flourish, just truth. I tossed the phone aside and opened my laptop. The screen glowed as I opened a blank document. Title, Civil Complaint, Personal Property Damage. I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I started typing. It wasn't just anger driving me, it was resolve. There was no more room for pleading, or talking things through, or waiting for someone else to validate my feelings. She had violated my home, my trust, my history. And now, I would make her answer for it. That night, I saved the document, shut the lid, and whispered to no one in particular. Next time, it won't be a conversation. The click of the door behind me echoed louder than I expected. Gideon hadn't said a word as I handed him the envelope. He just stared at it, like it might explode in his hands. Maybe it would. I didn't wait to see what he did next. There was nothing left to explain. The air outside was humid with the weight of early summer, thick enough to cling to skin. As I walked toward my car, a breeze rustled the dogwood trees, but it brought no comfort. I drove home slowly, without the radio, letting the silence settle deep into my bones. The next morning started like any other weekend, quiet, slow-moving. I made coffee, poured it into my favorite chipped mug, and sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper out of habit, not interest. The TV murmured faintly in the background, though I couldn't have told you what channel it was on. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Margot, a colleague at the firm. Margot, you okay? Just saw something odd about you on the Brookwood Group Facebook page. My stomach tightened. I opened the app, searched the group, and there it was, posted just an hour ago. Imagine losing your mind over a used dress. Some people are built for drama. No name, no direct tag, but it didn't have to be. The comments exploded underneath. Classic overreaction. Poor Callista. That family has always treated her like she's nothing. Didn't the bride wear it, like, years ago? She always acted like the queen of the neighborhood anyway. I scrolled and scrolled, feeling the blood drain from my face. A few people chimed in defending me, bless them. But most just speculated or stirred the pot. It was cruel and exhausting. There was no context, no truth, just people playing judge, jury, and gossip columnist behind keyboards. I put the phone down, walked over to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. 10 minutes later, a second notification popped up, this time from a woman I barely knew, Cassandra, one of Gideon's cousins. Another post, same thread. She always wanted to be the center of attention, never liked Callista, petty. That was when I knew. This wasn't accidental. This was coordinated. By early afternoon, it had bled into real life. I went to the grocery store to grab milk and dish soap, and while walking past the bakery aisle, I overheard two women whispering, just enough for my name to reach my ears. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. But back at the office Monday morning, it got worse. I walked into the break room just as two coworkers were laughing about something. As soon as I stepped in, they both paused like they'd been caught shoplifting. One of them, Janelle, someone I used to like, smiled too quickly. Hey, Giselle! We were just, talking about wardrobe disasters. You know, spilled wine, ruined dresses. The other chimed in, trying to be funny. Heard you're suing over fashion. You should have been a stylist instead of an accountant. I didn't smile. I didn't respond. I poured my coffee and left the room. I felt exposed. Like everyone had seen me naked, but not really me. Just a version of me they'd invented from secondhand comments and first-class malice. That night, after I got home and kicked off my shoes, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my messages. A ping came through from Tasha, an old friend from college I hadn't spoken to in months. Hey, I know things are messy, but I thought you should see this. Attached were screenshots, group chats, posts, names I recognized. Callista again, writing with the tone of someone who'd never known consequence. Callista. I wore it better than she ever did. That dress deserved a night out. Another message, seconds later. Callista. She's being a child. Imagine making that much fuss over a thrift store heirloom. Thrift store heirloom. I stared at the screen until the light blurred. Then I closed my eyes and took the longest breath of my life. I didn't cry. Not this time. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and deactivated my Facebook account. Then I shut down everything else. Instagram, LinkedIn, gone. If they wanted to talk, they'd have to talk to each other, without access to my life. I opened my gallery, found a photo I'd taken 2 days after the dress came back, hung on a plastic hanger in the laundry room, stained and frayed, the train dragging on the tile like something broken and abandoned. I posted it on my professional page with a single caption: "This is not just a dress." No tags, no explanations, just that. By morning, the comments were rolling in, quiet, thoughtful ones. This hurts to look at. My grandmother's dress was lost in a fire. I get this. People need to understand that value isn't always financial. I didn't respond to any of them. I just read. Then I got dressed, printed the final copy of the civil suit, and placed it in a manila envelope. I waited until Gideon was in his office, then knocked lightly and stepped inside. He turned, surprised to see me holding paperwork. "This is what 72 hours looks like," I said. "You had 48 hours since." "I gave you more. I've done enough waiting." He reached for the envelope, but I didn't hand it over yet. "You can give this to her. Or not. Doesn't matter. It's filed either way." His mouth opened slightly. "Giselle, no," I said. "No more conversations." I set the envelope down, turned, and left the room. As I walked back to the foyer, shoes clicking softly against the wood, a calm settled over me. Not peace, exactly, but something close to it. Resolve. Let's see how loud silence can be. I didn't expect the invitation when it came. Gideon forwarded me a message from his mother, short and polite in that carefully distant way she mastered long ago. "We're hosting a family barbecue this Saturday. Just a small gathering. Would love for you to come. Might be good to talk things out." "Talk things out," I muttered, reading it aloud like a punchline to a joke no one laughed at. Gideon offered no commentary, just shrugged and said, "You don't have to go." But maybe it's a step forward. A week had passed since the lawsuit was filed. In that time, I'd packed a small overnight bag and stayed with a friend in Midtown. I needed space, and he didn't argue. I suspect he welcomed the quiet. But I agreed to attend. Maybe I needed to see their faces one more time, without illusions. Maybe I needed to hear what they'd say when there were no screens, no keyboards, no curated Instagram captions, just flesh and bone and raw discomfort. Saturday evening came humid and still, the kind of southern heat that made your clothes cling before you even sat down. I pulled into the Rourke's long circular driveway a few minutes after 6. Cars already lined the curb. Laughter trickled from the backyard, and the smell of grilled meat floated through the air like bait. I walked around the side of the house, smoothing down the back of my skirt with one hand, clutching my purse tighter than necessary with the other. As I stepped through the open gate, every conversation paused just long enough to feel like a spotlight had clicked on. Callista was by the drink table, laughing with one of Gideon's cousins. Her face faltered for a half second when she saw me, then returned to brightness like a light switch. Everyone else gave polite nods, the kind you offer guests you hope won't stay too long. I said hello, kept my tone light, and found a corner near the rose bushes. I didn't eat, didn't drink, just waited. About 30 minutes in, Gideon raised a glass of beer and tapped the side with his wedding ring. "I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. These past few weeks have been tense, but I believe in family. I believe we can heal, even from big mistakes. So here's to letting go and moving forward." I watched him, watched the way he scanned the crowd, never quite meeting my eyes. The glasses clinked. Callista took a sip of her wine, then let out a snort loud enough to silence her entire table. "Some people can't move forward," she said, swirling her drink, "because they're too busy clutching onto dresses they'll never wear again." My spine went rigid. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. No one reacted. Not Gideon, not his parents. Just an awkward pause, then a forced chuckle from someone trying to keep things light. I didn't respond. I didn't look at her, but I felt my fists curl tight in my lap. Dinner was served buffet style. Everyone filled their plates, avoided my side of the patio. I wasn't there to mingle, and they knew it. Later, when the sun had dipped low and the sky turned the color of rust, Callista approached, wine in hand, smile soft and false. "Can we talk?" she asked. I gave a slight nod, led her to the far side of the lawn where no one else stood. She didn't waste time. "You don't have kids, Giselle," she said softly, almost gently. "What were you even saving that dress for?" I blinked. She stepped closer, her voice just above a whisper. "You clung to a fantasy because there's nothing else for you to pass down. That dress was all you had, and that's really sad." She smiled. It wasn't cruelty by accident. It wasn't immaturity. It was cold, clear calculation. She wanted to wound. And she succeeded. I turned without a word and walked back toward the house. Conversations resumed behind me, forks clinking against plates, laughter bubbling back up like a sitcom laugh track. No one followed me. I made it to the car before the first tear fell. Not from sadness, not even rage. It was something deeper, something that felt like recognition. I screamed, loud, raw, primal, the kind of scream that empties you out. And then I laughed, sharp, short, bitter. "I needed that," I whispered. Back home, I pulled the ruined dress from its box again. I sat with it draped across my lap in the dim living room, just like I had the night Callista returned it in that plastic bag. This time, though, I wasn't mourning. I was remembering. I reached for the envelope, the one my mother had tucked inside the bodice when she gave it to me. The letter was short, typed on old stationery, her handwriting looping at the bottom. "If they ever make you feel small, remember you came from a line of women who stitched their own worth." I folded the letter again, kissed the corner, and slid it back into the envelope. Then I picked up the phone and called the best preservationist in Savannah. "Hi," I said. "I need to preserve a gown. It's damaged, but I don't want it restored. I want it exactly as it is." A pause on the line. "You want to preserve the damage?" "Yes," I replied. "I want to remember it as it survived, not as it was ruined." We scheduled the drop-off for the next day. Before bed, I posted one final story. A photo of the dress, still stained, hanging in my office. Caption: "My silence ends in court." 2 weeks came and went with the kind of slow burn that made each day feel longer than the one before. The silence wasn't just mine anymore. It echoed in every hallway, every meal left untouched. Every night, Gideon didn't bother asking where I'd been. By the morning of the hearing, I wasn't nervous, I wasn't scared. I was simply ready. I chose a navy blue dress. Simple, clean lines, no embellishment. My mother used to say, "There's power in dressing with dignity, especially when others expect you to come undone." I pinned her locket inside the neckline and straightened my shoulders in the mirror. By 8:30, I was parked outside the courthouse. The Savannah Civil Courthouse wasn't anything grand. No soaring marble, no sweeping steps, just brick, glass, and quiet authority. I walked through the doors with a folder pressed to my chest like armor. Inside were the documents, the screenshots, the stills from the video footage, every piece of truth I'd gathered with surgical precision. Gideon was already there. He sat on the bench just outside the courtroom, legs crossed, scrolling through his phone like he was waiting for a dentist appointment. Next to him was Callista, lip gloss shiny, sunglasses perched atop her head indoors, heels that clicked with every shift of her leg. She saw me approach and smiled. Small, smug, I didn't return it. The courtroom wasn't crowded, just the judge, the attorneys, a court reporter, and a few scattered observers, mostly from the local press. They always sniffed out family drama that reeked of old money and new scandal. We were called to stand. The judge, a tall woman with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for not suffering fools, nodded at both tables. "Let's begin." My attorney, Mr. Lewin, spoke first. Calm, methodical. He laid out the timeline, the gown's provenance, the emotional and financial value. Then he asked me to take the stand. I walked up slowly, not from hesitation, but from intention. I sat, adjusted the mic. He asked me about the dress. I spoke clearly. "It belonged to my mother. She gave it to me before she passed. I wore it on my wedding day. It was supposed to be preserved, passed down again." He asked me what happened. "My sister-in-law entered my home without permission. She removed the gown from storage, She wore it to a party. She returned it in a plastic bag, stained, torn, soaked in alcohol. The room was silent except for the soft tapping of the court reporter's keys. Then, the footage. The screen lit up as the clip played. Callista, unlocking the door, going straight to the guest room, pulling out the gown, spinning, drinking wine, smirking into the mirror, and then, the middle finger to the camera. Someone in the room audibly sucked in a breath. I didn't turn to see who. My attorney rested his case. Callista's attorney approached the bench. He was younger than expected, overconfident. "Ms. Vexley, could you tell us what your understanding of the dress was?" She stood, twisting a strand of hair. "I thought it was just, an old gown. I didn't know it was like the dress. It wasn't labeled. It was just in the closet." He nodded, as if she'd just solved the case. "So you didn't know?" "No," she said. "I just thought it would be fun." He paused. "And the video, do you deny its accuracy?" Callista bit her lip. "I was joking. It was just a dumb moment." Then came the screenshots. My attorney walked to the screen and clicked through them like flipping a photo album. I wore it better than she ever did. That dress deserved a night out. Can't believe she's crying over thrift store nostalgia. Silence. The judge finally spoke. "This is not a matter of misunderstanding. This is not an accident. What I see is intentional negligence laced with personal disrespect. This wasn't about a piece of clothing. It was about violating someone's space, her memories, and doing so with no regard for consequence." Her gavel tapped once. "I rule in favor of the plaintiff, Giselle Carlisle." I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The defendant will pay damages covering emotional distress and property destruction. Full legal fees are to be reimbursed. An official written apology must be submitted within 24 hours. Callista sat down like she'd been deflated. Her eyes watered, not out of remorse, but humiliation. Gideon looked at me, said nothing. I stood, nodded at the judge, and walked out. Outside, the reporters waited. Cameras clicked. Microphones extended. "Miss Carlisle, do you have a statement?" I stopped, turned toward them. Justice doesn't bring back what I lost, but it tells me I'm not invisible. Then I walked past them, past Gideon, past Callista, who now refused to meet my gaze. He called after me. "Giselle, wait." I kept walking. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea and watched the sky turn lavender. An email pinged on my phone. Subject: Formal apology. C. Vexley. I opened it, stared at the body of the message for half a second, and hit delete without reading. Forgiveness isn't silence, it's closure. The sun rose slower these days, or maybe I just noticed it more now. It had been almost a full month since the verdict, and in that time, something in me had softened. But not in the way they probably hoped. It wasn't forgiveness for them. It was grace for myself. I'd moved into a small apartment in downtown Savannah. One bedroom, exposed brick, tall windows that let in just enough morning light to make the coffee taste better. The landlord was an older woman who brought her dog to collect rent. The neighbors were quiet, and the air was mine. Sometimes I'd drive past the house Gideon and I used to share, not out of longing, there was none of that left, but out of a kind of curiosity. The way you look at a place that once held a version of yourself you'd outgrown. I never stopped, never turned down the street, just glanced in the rearview mirror as it disappeared behind me, smaller every time. Gideon hadn't reached out since court. Neither had Callista. I didn't expect them to. One afternoon, just after closing the front door of my new place and setting down a box of bridal catalogs, I walked into my newly rented storefront on a quiet corner off Whitaker Street. The sign hadn't been installed yet, but the name was already etched in my heart. Second Grace. It wasn't just a boutique. It was something else. Something still becoming. The walls were still bare except for one. On it hung a simple wooden frame, inside of which was a carefully preserved piece of torn lace, the corner of the ruined gown. Next to it, mounted under glass, was the note from my mother, the one she wrote when she gave me the dress, now aged into sepia along the folds. Below both, engraved on brushed brass, "Wear love, not perfection." Brides came in slowly at first. Women who weren't looking for spectacle, but stories. Some cried when they saw the dresses. Others laughed nervously, unsure if they belonged in something so soft. But they did. They all did. A few weeks into opening, Mr. Lewin, the attorney who'd helped with the lawsuit, stopped by with 2 coffees. "You've got your hands full," he said, nodding toward the fitting area where a young woman was twirling in front of a mirror. "I do," I smiled. "And I like it that way." He sipped his drink. "Ever think about wearing that smile again, for someone else?" I raised a brow, amused. "Was that your version of subtle?" He laughed. "Just planting seeds." I didn't say yes, didn't say no. Just sipped my coffee and watched the girl in the mirror adjust the veil with reverence. That afternoon, a bride named Carla came in with her grandmother. She'd just gotten engaged and couldn't afford anything near the prices she'd seen online. Her voice trembled when she told me she thought maybe she didn't deserve the big moment. I helped her into a soft chiffon gown, then knelt behind her and pinned the back. "You deserve to feel treasured," I said. "Not just loved, treasured." When she turned around and saw herself, she burst into tears. So did her grandmother. That night, after the last light had been turned off and the front door locked, I sat at the counter scrolling through the boutique's growing online page. Someone had shared a photo of Carla standing outside the shop, her hands over her mouth in disbelief. The caption read, "Not just dresses, she gives you back your story." I don't remember crying then. I just remember exhaling, as if I'd been holding my breath for years. Later that week, while sorting through boxes the dry cleaner had returned, I found something unexpected wedged beneath the tissue paper. A small envelope I hadn't seen before. It was addressed in my mother's handwriting, more hurried than usual, likely tucked in before the wedding day. I sat down and opened it. "If you must grieve, do it standing. If you must start again, do it with grace. You are not broken. You are becoming." My hands trembled, but not from pain this time. It was a different kind of trembling. The kind that comes when you know you've finally stepped into your own shape. I folded the letter and placed it inside a drawer in the front counter. The next morning, I opened the shop as usual. Sunlight poured in from the east-facing windows. The bell above the door chimed. A young woman entered, wide-eyed, clutching a small bouquet of silk flowers. I smiled, stepped forward, and held out my hand. "Welcome to Second Grace." And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to be taken from me. I was ready to give, because they hadn't broken me. They had unraveled what was never meant to stay. And I had stitched something better. This time, the thread is mine to hold. Sometimes, what people dismiss as just a dress holds decades of memory, love, and legacy. This wasn't about fabric, it was about respect. When family crosses boundaries and calls it love, how far would you go to protect your voice, your story? What would you have done if you were in my place? If stories like this speak to you, don't forget to subscribe. There are more true family stories, filled with betrayal, healing, and strength, waiting to be told. Let's face them together. "Hello, I'm Varel." My mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "You have 24 hours to get out or I'll call the cops." Then handed my house, the one I paid for, to my unemployed sister. And she didn't flinch. She smiled and said, "This is my house now." So I packed everything I owned, alone, in silence. But they didn't know. I had one move left. They came back, expecting comfort. But what they found was a stranger at the door, and their names nowhere on the deed. How did it come to this? How does a family decide one daughter is disposable, while calling the other a legacy? And why does the one who held it all together have to disappear to finally be seen? Let me tell you, Friday nights used to mean something in my family. At least they did to me. For the past 8 years, ever since my parents hit a rough patch after Grandpa died, I made it a ritual. I'd bring groceries, cook a warm dinner, and sit with them in the dining room, pretending we were still a family. That night started no differently. The kitchen smelled like garlic and roasted rosemary. The roast I'd bought on sale from Giant Eagle the night before had been in the oven since 4. I even made Callista's favorite mashed sweet potatoes, though I wasn't sure she'd even show. She wasn't around much. Pittsburgh didn't offer the kind of lights or attention she was chasing. She usually only came back when Mom called her home for something, birthdays, anniversaries, or when bills needed paying. Callista arrived just before dinner was plated, wearing a faux fur vest and boots that probably cost more than my last car repair. She kissed Mom on the cheek like a talk show guest and tossed her bag on the entryway bench. "Traffic was a nightmare," she said, rolling her eyes. "Some of us actually live where things happen." Mom chuckled and called her baby girl, like she hadn't been the one to ghost the family for months. Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. I smiled anyway. Because that's what I did. I smoothed things over. I kept the peace. I brought dinner. We sat around the table, the way we used to. For a while, I let myself believe the silence between bites was the comfortable kind, not the loaded kind. But when Callista started making vague comments about big changes coming and stepping into what's hers, my gut tightened. Then Mom folded her napkin, set it on the table, and said flatly, "You have 24 hours to move out." I thought I misheard her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look angry. Just final. My fork hovered in midair. "What?" Callista leaned back, sipping from the wine I brought, not even trying to hide her smirk. "Thanks for furnishing my house." Dad didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on his plate like it might whisper an escape plan. "You heard me?" Mom said. "It's time. This house is Callista's now." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I've lived here. I paid for—" "You were staying here temporarily," she snapped, her voice ice. "You helped when we needed it, but that doesn't make it yours." Temporarily. 8 years. Mortgage payments, repairs, nights spent painting, fixing broken faucets, arguing with the electric company so their power wouldn't be shut off. I looked at my father. Nothing. I stood, not because I had anything to say, but because if I stayed seated, I might start shaking. They didn't follow me when I left the table, didn't ask if I was okay, didn't ask where I was going, and why would they? Their decision had already been made, long before dinner was ever served. Upstairs, I walked into my childhood bedroom and closed the door with the softest click I could manage. The framed photo of Grandpa still sat on the shelf, tucked behind an old jewelry box. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking under me like it knew this moment had been waiting to arrive. I stared at the wall, unblinking. I wasn't crying. That surprised me, but some things don't cause tears. Some things are too deep for that. 12% battery left on my phone, no charger in sight. My old one had frayed months ago, and the new one I kept downstairs. I didn't go get it. Instead, I opened my closet and pulled out the small suitcase I hadn't touched in years. The zipper snagged slightly, and I had to tug it twice before it gave. I packed deliberately. Essentials only, nothing sentimental, not yet. As I folded a sweatshirt and placed it inside, a soft voice called from the hallway. "I always thought this room was too small for you." "Callista." I didn't respond. She leaned against the doorframe. "You were always good at making things work, though, even when they didn't fit." Still, I said nothing. She shrugged. "Anyway, I'll be moving in officially tomorrow. You'll want to clear out before then." "Is that all?" I asked, not bothering to look at her. "For now," she said, then turned away. "But just so you know, Mom didn't want it to be this way. She just had to make a choice. And well, it was obvious." When she was gone, I let the silence press against me like a second skin. By the time the clock hit midnight, I'd packed 2 bags, labeled a box with important, and placed my keys on the nightstand. I carried the bags downstairs myself. No one offered help. Not even Dad, who watched from the recliner as I struggled with the front door. Outside, the air had turned colder. April in Pittsburgh liked to pretend it was spring until nightfall reminded everyone that winter had teeth. I loaded my car in the driveway. The trunk wouldn't close properly over the box, so I adjusted it twice, then finally gave up and strapped it down with bungee cords from the garage. Just as I turned to grab the last bag, I heard laughter. Callista stood on the front porch, her phone angled up toward the house. "This is where the magic begins," she said into the camera. "My sanctuary, my story, my new chapter." She didn't see me watching. She didn't care. And maybe that was the point. I stood there, holding my life in my hands, while my sister live-streamed her takeover to strangers who'd never know the cost. I didn't say goodbye, didn't slam the door, didn't ask why. I just drove away. And she didn't even ask if I had somewhere to go, because she didn't care. By the time I found a place to park on the side street, my arms ached from hauling boxes that didn't feel heavy until I started lifting them alone. The air had turned sharper, still carrying that spring sting Pittsburgh always clung to at night. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, just breathing. My phone buzzed, 12% battery left. Still, I could have gone inside to grab the charger, but stepping back in there meant stepping into the performance again, and I didn't have the energy. I didn't want to see the way Mom pretended this was normal, or the way Callista posed in corners of the house for her camera. I'd only left 20 minutes earlier, and yet it already felt like I didn't belong anymore. I pulled out the last box from the trunk. Inside were my childhood yearbooks, the handmade curtains I'd sewn with Velma when I was 16, and a lamp I bought with my first paycheck. That lamp had lit the dark hallway every night since Dad's knees gave out, so he wouldn't trip. I'd never once asked to be thanked. As I was taping the lid closed, the porch light clicked on. I didn't hear footsteps, just her voice. "You never created anything in this house," Mom said. Her words were deliberate, practiced. I turned, slowly. She stood at the top of the steps in her robe, arms folded like she was preparing to scold a stranger. "You only lived here," she added, with the kind of finality people use when they're closing doors they've already locked behind them. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't have words, because I had too many. None of them would have reached her anyway. She tilted her chin. "You always thought working meant ownership, that just because you helped didn't mean you earned something." My grip tightened on the box. Helped? I could have laid out every receipt. Mortgage payments, utility bills, the $11,000 plumbing overhaul when the pipes burst in 19. But I didn't move. I didn't explain. I nodded once, not in agreement, but in understanding. That's when it hit me. She'd made peace with erasing me long before tonight. As I lifted the box into the car, I heard the door click shut behind her. Upstairs, I sat in my old room again. Only this time, there was no light on. I didn't need it. I knew every inch of this space. The wallpaper was peeling slightly near the closet, the result of water damage I'd tried to patch last year with spare caulking. The left window always stuck in the middle track. The dresser still had the scratches from when I was 12 and thought carving initials was some kind of rebellion. I ran my fingers along the edge of the desk, remembering the nights I stayed up late working, budgeting, trying to make sense of the bills. When Dad got laid off and Mom refused to downsize, I became the stopgap. I filled the cracks with overtime, with sacrifice, with silence. The house never thanked me. I sat back on the floor and stared at the ceiling. My eyes drifted to the corner, where I had repainted the walls after Callista knocked over red nail polish in a tantrum. I remembered patching that section alone while she cried on the phone to an ex in the next room. Funny how quickly memories shift from warm to humiliating. There were no thank yous, just more expectations, more quiet debts that no one remembered owing. I walked down the stairs an hour later, carrying another load. Callista was in the living room now, curled up with a throw blanket and a glass of wine. Her phone was angled toward her, ring light on, talking to someone who wasn't in the room. "You guys, I'm so excited to finally have a space to call mine. This house has been in our family for generations, and it's such an honor to continue the legacy." Legacy. I paused at the bottom step. I wanted to laugh, but not the kind of laugh that escapes, the kind that builds in your chest and makes your hands shake. She looked up and caught me watching, didn't flinch, just smiled and gave a little wave. "Don't let me interrupt your packing," she said, as if she were the host of a show I wasn't invited to. I walked into the kitchen. Every drawer I opened, every cabinet I touched had something I bought, cleaned, repaired. The stainless steel toaster, mine. The water filter, replaced it last winter. The washer and dryer in the basement, paid for in cash after Mom said the budget was too tight. And yet, you never built anything here. I walked back to the living room, pulled out a sticky note from my pocket, and placed it on the flat-screen TV. Mine. Callista glanced at it. You're being petty. I moved to the bookshelf. Mine, I whispered again, tagging the shelves. I didn't stop. The rug from Target I'd saved for. The recliner Dad now claimed as his. The coffee table I assembled after a 12-hour shift. Each item got a tag. She followed me with her eyes, but didn't say a word. When I reached the washer in the basement, I paused. There was dust on the floor. No one had cleaned down there in weeks. I smiled, oddly comforted. That washer had run 6 cycles a week when Mom refused to send Dad's clothes to the laundromat. It hummed late into the night during flu season, when Callista's sheets needed constant cleaning. I stuck the note on top. Mine. By midnight, the house was dotted with soft yellow squares. I stood in the hallway, breathing slowly. This wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. They erased my name from this home. So I decided to erase my presence, piece by piece. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed in the car, watching the sun attempt to pierce through the misted glass of my windshield. The heater ran low, humming just enough to keep my fingers from going numb. My hands still smelled like cardboard and packing tape. Around 5 in the morning, I decided to head back, not into the house, not really, but into the garage. I'd remembered there was still a stack of boxes in the corner marked Family Docs. I'd stored them there years ago, when we cleaned out Grandpa's room and no one else wanted to deal with it. I pulled the garage door up manually, it squeaked like it always had, and stepped into the cold, cement-floored space that had once been his workshop. Dust floated in the morning light, casting soft shadows over shelves filled with forgotten paint cans, rusted tools, and a folding chair that had no business still standing. As I shuffled aside a bin of extension cords and old garden gloves, I spotted the box. Tucked away beneath an old tarp, warped slightly on one side from moisture, but intact. I pried it open and thumbed through the contents, half expecting to find nothing more than outdated receipts and brittle newspaper clippings. Instead, I found a plaque, a small brass one mounted on a piece of stained wood, meant to commemorate the community fundraiser we held after Grandpa passed. I remembered designing it, how we had to push for local sponsors, plan the bake sale, organize the silent auction, all to save the house. I flipped it over and read the engraving. In honor of the ones who saved this home. Velma, Dorian, Callista. My name wasn't there. For a moment, I thought I'd missed it. Maybe they listed me under a different title. Maybe it was on the back. No. I turned it again, ran my finger over the names, felt the cold of the metal seep into my fingertips. I'd donated more than anyone. I'd written checks from my own account when Mom's credit cards maxed out. I drained $25,000 in savings in less than 3 years to cover mortgage gaps, tax liens, utility emergencies, and I didn't even make the list. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't an oversight. It was erasure. Intentional. Clean. Polished. I sat on the dusty garage floor with the plaque in my lap, staring at names that had done nothing but take up space and judgment. A part of me thought, this can't be real. But the colder, sharper part of me whispered, they never meant for you to belong. You were the help, the backup, the daughter who stayed because no one else would. And just like that, I was pulled into the past. 2 years ago, a Tuesday. I was sitting in my boss's office, 3rd floor, corner window. The same room where promotions were usually offered, but that morning there was no congratulations, no smiles. Virel, he said, sliding a performance report across the table. We've noticed some delays on your side. I remembered the way the paper blurred. I hadn't been sleeping. I'd missed a deadline the week Dad's medication coverage fell through. I'd worked through the night replacing pipes in our kitchen and still showed up to the site with blistered hands. I've been juggling a lot, I'd said, too embarrassed to explain it all. He nodded gently. We get that. But HR needs documentation, and we can't keep making exceptions. A week later, I got an official notice from HR. One more slip-up and I'd be placed on performance probation. No overtime, no raises, no flexibility. I cried in the parking lot that day. Not big sobs, just silent, tight, throat-clenching tears. I'd whispered to myself, I can't keep holding this alone. But I had. I always did. Back in the garage, present day, I wiped the plaque clean with the sleeve of my coat and stood. It wasn't just about recognition, it was about truth. They erased me from the wall, but not from the structure. I was the beams under the plaster. The wiring behind the walls, the part you don't see, but that keeps everything running. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I stepped out into the driveway and leaned against my car, pulled out my phone and opened the contacts list. My thumb hovered for just a second before I tapped her name. Ramira. We hadn't talked in months, not because of a falling out, just life. She had started a firm downtown after graduating law school. We used to share coffee on her balcony and talk about fixing the world. She always had that tone in her voice, no nonsense, sharp, surgical. I typed one line. Can you help me look into something legal? I didn't even expect a reply right away, but it came within 30 seconds. Come over. I've been waiting for this day. I stared at those words for a long moment. Not what happened. Not, are you okay? Just a simple acknowledgement. She wasn't surprised I texted. It made me wonder, how much had I missed by waiting this long? By the time I pulled into the parking garage downtown, traffic had picked up. School buses groaned along Carson Street, and early risers were already pacing the sidewalks with coffee cups and wrinkled collars. I found a spot on the third level and sat still for a few seconds longer than I needed to. My hands hadn't unclenched since I left the house. Ramira lived in a renovated building just off Liberty Avenue, clean lines, concrete walls, cold floors that echoed when you walked in heels. The kind of place that told you its owner didn't just pay rent, they paid attention. I knocked twice, and the door swung open, and there she was, still sharp as ever, no makeup, hair twisted into a clip, barefoot but standing like a courtroom judge. I brewed the good stuff, she said simply, stepping aside to let me in. I followed her inside, clutching the folder I'd brought like it could explain everything. We sat across from each other at her island counter. She poured coffee into mugs, black for her, cream for me, just like college. The familiarity of it nearly undid me. She didn't ask what happened, didn't say, start from the beginning. She just looked at me the way people do when they already know the ending, but let you say it anyway. I'm done, I said finally. They kicked me out. She didn't flinch. Velma said I never created anything in that house, that I was just living there. Ramira exhaled slowly, leaned back, arms crossed. I told you 3 years ago, you were a wallet to them, not a daughter. Her words didn't sting. They fit too well. Like finally hearing a song you'd been humming for years without knowing the lyrics. I remembered it instantly. We'd been out after work, splitting garlic fries at some pub. I had just paid for Dad's car repairs again, and Callista had flown back from some influencer retreat without telling anyone. I had tried to rationalize it. She's just going through a phase. And Ramira, glass in hand, had looked me dead in the eye. You keep saving people who never asked to be saved, she'd said, and never thanked you when you did. Back then, I laughed it off. I told her family was complicated, that we all carry things. Now I knew I was the only one carrying anything. She opened her laptop, tapped in her password, and turned the screen toward me. Want to see something? She asked, tone neutral. I nodded. She pulled up Callista's Instagram. A live story was still running, posted less than an hour ago. On the screen, my sister stood on the back patio, the one I'd laid tile for during 2 consecutive weekends while juggling client reports. The new string lights I hung above the railing sparkled in the background like some Pinterest fantasy. This is my space, Callista said sweetly to the camera. My new chapter, a family heirloom I was trusted with. She even twirled. I felt my stomach twist. The coffee in my hand suddenly turned bitter. Ramira didn't comment. She didn't need to. I closed the laptop and set my mug down. She's branding her lie with my life. That was all I could manage. We sat in silence for a while. I didn't cry, not because I didn't feel the weight of it, but because the anger had hollowed out a place where tears used to be. She's going to keep doing this, I said, stealing the story while I disappear from it. Ramira finally spoke. Then don't disappear. Take it back. I looked at her. Not in the way people ask for ideas, but like someone who'd forgotten what it meant to have choices. You think I have a case? I asked. She shrugged. Practical. Let's find out. I'll start looking into the deed. Any paperwork she used to claim ownership. If you transferred anything under pressure, it matters. I nodded. I didn't sign anything willingly, and I sure as hell didn't agree to be deleted. She smirked at that. Good. Then you don't need to yell. Just make them read. I leaned back, the tension in my spine finally giving way. I won't fight them their way, I said quietly. But if they step one more inch into what's mine, I will erase them from the narrative the same way they tried to erase me. Ramira raised her mug. Now that's the Virel I remember. By the time we finished the second pot of coffee, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Direction. We reviewed what I had, copies of bank transfers, emails with utility bills in my name, photos of receipts. It was a start. Before I left, Ramira said, "Don't text Velma yet. Let me handle the paperwork side, but if you want to set a boundary with Callista." I already had my phone out. I didn't plan to scream or curse. That wasn't who I was. Not anymore. Instead, I opened our thread and typed one line. You're free to enjoy what's yours. Just make sure you actually own it. I hit send. She read it 2 minutes later, didn't respond. But that night, the game changed. The sky outside was bleeding into dusk when I pulled the roll-up door to my storage unit. It let out a tired metal groan, echoing against the rows of concrete stalls and fluorescent ceiling lights. My body ached, not from lifting, but from carrying too much for too long. Inside, the unit smelled faintly of cardboard and dryer sheets. I'd crammed pieces of my life in here over the years. Extra furniture, old tax folders, and storage tubs filled with things I never found time to sort. Now I wasn't looking for sentiment. I was hunting for proof. In the back left corner, behind a dented filing cabinet, I found what I was looking for. 2 green banker's boxes marked House Docs in permanent marker. The tape had curled at the edges from time, but they were still sealed. I sat on the cold floor and opened the first one. Receipts, check stubs, printouts of electric bills. And then, halfway through the second box, I found a stack of bank statements, notarized letters, and loan agreements, one after another, addressed to Velma. Every single document had her signature. Her cursive hadn't changed in decades. Looped V, tight E, that little flourish at the end of her A. Clear as day, my name appeared in every transaction. Transferor, sender, co-signer. There was no mistaking it. She'd taken tens of thousands from me, quietly. With the full understanding it was a loan, or sometimes just a temporary reimbursement she'd never returned. And now she acted like I was just a long-term guest. I snapped pictures of each document, emailing them to myself as backup. Then I texted Ramira. Found the receipts, headed to the house. I'm not there to fight, but I'm not leaving empty-handed. She replied with one word. Careful. I drove slowly back to the neighborhood. The porch lights were on at the house, a soft amber glow spilling down the steps like a memory trying too hard to be comforting. I parked on the street, took a breath, and walked up the drive. The front door wasn't locked. It never was before me. Inside, the television hummed low. I heard it before I saw him. Dad, sitting in his recliner, remote in hand, the same faded sweater draped over his shoulders. He didn't look up. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence wrap around us. I'm just here to speak, I said quietly. Still no movement. In the kitchen, I could hear Velma moving around. She entered the room, wiping her hands on a dish towel like I'd walked into a stranger's dinner party uninvited. You're here to cause a scene? She asked, voice clipped. I didn't raise mine. I'm here to offer a final courtesy. She crossed her arms. If this is about the house, it's not about the house anymore. It's about the lies. And the fact that I have the paperwork to prove them. Velma blinked once, then twice. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out 3 documents, laying them flat on the coffee table between us. She didn't move to touch them. These are just a few, I continued, signed by you, acknowledging debts, loans, transfers, from me to you, all in your handwriting. Dad finally shifted. His eyes met mine for the first time since I walked in. There was no warmth, just a hollow discomfort, the kind men wear when they know the truth but won't say it out loud. You should have come to us sooner, he said softly. I stared at him. I did, for years. You just didn't listen. Velma stepped forward, voice rising slightly. I don't remember signing those. Then you should have thought before picking up a pen. Her mouth twitched, like she wanted to snap, but realized she couldn't. Dad cleared his throat. Let it go, Varel, please, for the family. I turned to him. You taught me to be strong. You told me that when people don't stand up for you, you stand for yourself. So don't ask me to forget that lesson now. He looked away. I gathered the papers and slid them back into my bag. No yelling, no slammed doors, just clarity. I won't be back, I told them, but you'll hear from me, officially. Outside, the air had gone cold again, the kind of chill that sneaks under your jacket and stays there. I drove directly to Ramira's office. She was already waiting, lights on, a folder open on her desk. She didn't smile when she saw me. She just nodded toward the chair across from hers. I handed her the documents. These are originals, with backups sent to your email, every one of them signed. She flipped through them, her expression unreadable but razor-sharp. This is good, she said. It establishes a pattern, and it gives us legal standing to contest any title transfers, especially if coercion or misrepresentation is involved. She printed out 2 affidavits, one to notarize my statement about financial support, and another to confirm I never signed away ownership. As I signed, I noticed my hand didn't shake. When I finished, I looked out the window. The city blinked in quiet rhythm below us. Somewhere in that sprawl, my mother was still clinging to a version of the truth she thought no one would challenge. I warned them, I said, the pen still warm in my grip. Now they'll see what I do when warnings go unheard. By noon the next day, I knew something was off. Ramira had filed our preliminary notice with the county office that morning, a small calculated move to prevent any sudden property transactions without our knowledge. Nothing major, just a legal nudge, a warning shot across the bow. But by late afternoon, one of our old neighbors, Mrs. Ellen Dorsey, texted me. Hey, sweetie, it read. Hope you're well. Just a heads up, your mom and sister are hosting something tonight. I saw a note on the HOA board. Family celebration and transition announcement. Thought it sounded odd. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove straight to the house. They weren't there. No cars in the driveway. The blinds in the front room were open, an unusual detail in itself. Velma never liked the house to look exposed, as she used to say. But now, it was like they were advertising it. I parked 2 houses down, walked up the driveway casually, and used my old key. I'd given them the spare set, but I'd never surrendered mine. Inside, the house smelled like bleach and overripe fruit. Someone had done a quick surface clean, the kind that masks everything underneath. The furniture was arranged differently now. Callista's touch. More velvet throws, gold-framed mirrors, fake plants that screamed online brand instead of family home. I didn't linger. I walked directly to the study. Velma's office had always been off-limits to everyone else. She kept it locked even when we were kids, like she was guarding nuclear codes instead of overdue bills and expired insurance policies. But today, for the first time in my memory, the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first, lemon polish and something older, mustier. Papers were neatly stacked on the desk. Labeled folders lined the shelves in color-coded order. I scanned the labels. Medical, taxes, trust, utilities, legal. One folder caught my eye. Family legal. It was tucked toward the back of the bottom shelf, half buried behind some archived school yearbooks. That alone was suspicious. Velma didn't bury things unless she knew they were dangerous. I pulled it free and sat at her desk, thumbing through the contents. Meeting notes. Agendas. Typed summaries labeled with dates I recognized, months before she told me to leave. A document titled Transition Plan laid out, in bullet points, a step-by-step timeline for removing Varelli from residence with minimal confrontation. Another note, this one handwritten, read, "Avoid legal paper trail. Do not trigger financial conversations. Maintain public-facing family unity." And then, beneath that, frame Varelli's exit as her gracious decision to prioritize her career. Emphasize Callista's need for stability. My chest tightened. I hadn't imagined it. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It was coordinated, rehearsed. Like I was a liability, they had to phase out of the picture carefully, cleanly. The final straw was a printed email thread between Velma and Callista. Velma, once she's gone, make sure you host a few live events ASAP. Get the story out before she tries to twist it. Callista, already planning it. I'll make it about heritage. People eat that up. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to anymore. Instead, I stood, took pictures of every page, and emailed them directly to Ramira. "Found it all," I typed. "It's worse than we thought." Ramira replied in seconds. "Come in now. Bring originals." I slipped the folder into my bag and left through the back door. That evening, we sat in her office for hours, building the case. "They didn't just lie," Ramira said, flipping through the printed thread. "They executed a narrative, a deliberate act of image control at your expense." I nodded slowly. "They treated me like an obstacle, not a daughter." She set down the papers. "Then let's treat them like what they've become, opponents." We drafted a preliminary claim of title fraud, intent to conceal inheritance, and defamation by omission. Each point backed by the emails, notes, and financial records I'd collected. I signed everything with a steady hand. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I didn't want to sit in silence. I didn't want to refresh emails or scroll through any more posts of my sister reclaiming her roots in front of a house she didn't earn. So instead, I wrote a letter. It wasn't long. It wasn't emotional. It was a statement. To Velma, any further attempt to misrepresent my role in this home, financially, legally, or personally, will be handled through official legal avenues. This is no longer personal. It's documented. I printed the letter, folded it neatly, and drove back to the house. It was dark this time. No porch lights, no candles in the windows, just the cold quiet of a house that no longer felt like mine, but still reeked of everything I'd poured into it. I dropped the letter in the mailbox and walked away. The next morning, I woke up to another text, this time from a different neighbor. "Hey, just saw your sister filming another home tour. Thought you were still living there?" I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I typed back, "Not for long." 2 mornings after I left that letter in Velma's mailbox, Ramira called and told me to meet her at the county records office by 10:30 sharp. She didn't give details, just said, "Wear something you wouldn't mind being photographed in if this ends up in court." By the time I arrived, she was already there, coffee in one hand and a manila folder tucked beneath her arm. I could tell something had shifted. Her walk was faster, her voice lower, and when she looked at me, it wasn't pity I saw anymore. It was preparation. We didn't wait long. Within 15 minutes, we were seated in front of a clerk with a thinning hairline and glasses that slid too far down his nose. Ramira handed him a case number, and he typed away on his keyboard like the keys owed him money. Then he got quiet. A few clicks later, he slid a file across the desk. "This is what you requested." Ramira opened it carefully, as though handling a loaded weapon. Her eyes scanned the top page before she pushed it toward me. I didn't recognize the form at first, not until I saw the words, "Incompetency Declaration," printed in bold. It was signed 3 years ago, right after the car accident that left me with a mild concussion and a dislocated shoulder. Nothing major. I recovered fully in under a month. But here, in ink and official letterhead, Velma had declared me unfit to manage legal or financial matters for a sustained period. And on that same date, a separate document had begun the process of transferring partial ownership of the house to Callista. I looked at the 2 dates side by side. One claimed I couldn't handle responsibility, the other made sure that responsibility, and the property, landed somewhere else. I sat there, staring at my mother's signature on both documents, and felt the air leave my lungs in pieces. She used your accident, Ramira said, her voice low. It gave her the legal excuse to start the paperwork, without notifying you. I clenched my jaw, not from shock, but from validation. I hadn't been paranoid. I hadn't been overthinking. They'd built this whole narrative while smiling in my face. We left the building in silence, the folder clutched to my chest like a trophy I never wanted to win. On the drive back to her firm, Ramira said, "You ready to see how deep this goes?" I nodded. "Let's dig." By noon, we were in her office, sifting through archives and pulling up every transaction linked to the house over the last 5 years, utility records, tax bills, home repair permits. My name was stamped across everything, payments, contractor contacts, authorization forms. But then came the final blow, a will. One Eldon had hinted at months ago, back when he sat across from me on his porch and said, "Your grandpa made sure you'd be okay. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Ramira, ever the bloodhound, had requested a search of archived wills from the county. And there it was, filed and notarized 6 months before Grandpa passed. He'd left the house to me. Only me, no split shares, no contingency clauses. Just a direct inheritance to my granddaughter Varel, who has given this home more love than I ever could. I read that line over and over until the words blurred. They knew. Velma and Callista had known. They'd seen this will. And instead of honoring it, they watched me sink thousands of dollars and years of labor into a home they had no right to control. Then they pushed me out of it like I was some squatter overstaying my welcome. They let you pay to protect an asset they were already trying to take from you, Ramira said. They weaponized your love for the place. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The rage had moved past heat. It was cold now, sharp, clean, dangerous. That evening, I walked into the house for the last time. Velma was in the kitchen, leaning over the counter with a mug of tea like it was just another Thursday. She didn't smile when she saw me. "Back again?" she asked flatly. I said nothing. Just pulled a single envelope from my coat pocket and placed it on the table between us. She didn't touch it. "This is a copy of the will you pretended didn't exist," I said, then laid another document on top. "And this is the form you filed, declaring me mentally incompetent after a minor concussion, the same week you started transferring the deed." Her face changed, slowly. She turned pale, then red, then pale again. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but nothing came. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "You don't understand what it's like to protect a child who can't protect herself." I blinked. "You mean Callista?" Velma's chin lifted slightly, defensive. "She's fragile. She wouldn't survive what you've handled. She needed stability, security." "And I didn't?" I asked. "She's not like you," she whispered. I let the weight of that sit. She meant it as a defense, but all it did was confirm the truth. They never saw me as a daughter. Just a fallback. "No," I said. "She's not like me. She had someone shielding her from consequences. I had to shield myself from you." Velma sat down hard in the nearest chair. Her hands shook slightly as she lifted the tea to her lips, but she didn't drink. I didn't wait for her to respond. I didn't need her to. I turned, walked out of the kitchen, and didn't look back. This time, I wasn't being forced to leave. This time, I was choosing to. 1 week later, they came back to find the locks had changed. I wasn't there to watch it unfold, but I didn't need to be. I could picture every frame. The way Velma would furrow her brow as she jiggled the doorknob. The way Callista would storm past her with that entitled sway she always used when she thought someone else was in her way. And Dorian? He'd just stand there, hands in his pockets, offering no solutions. Just silence, as always. But what none of them expected was the man who answered the door. "I bought this place last Friday," he told them. Calm, matter of fact. He wasn't young, probably mid-50s, with a weathered face that looked like it had seen more of life than my family ever would. I'd picked him on purpose, a local business owner, a father of 3. Someone who actually knew what it meant to build a home, not just pose in front of one. Velma stepped back first, color draining from her face. Callista didn't back down. She tried to push past the man. "This is our house," she snapped. "Not anymore," he said, holding up a printed copy of the deed. "Transfer of ownership filed and sealed. Want to call your lawyer?" I heard all this later, of course, from the very neighbor who once dropped cookies at our door every Christmas. She watched it from her porch with the kind of quiet interest only older women can master. She said Callista looked like she'd been slapped, Velma looked like she'd seen a ghost, and Dorian, she said he just turned around and walked to the car. Meanwhile, Ramira and I were at the downtown real estate office, finalizing the paperwork. The funds had already transferred. The house, my house, was no longer under my name. And that was the point. I didn't want it anymore. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. For months, they weaponized my silence, my loyalty, my years of cleaning the gutters, fixing broken pipes, replacing shingles after storms while they did. What exactly? Now, all I did was file what was legally mine. They wanted the image of ownership. They got the reality of loss. That evening, I opened my laptop, poured a glass of wine, and wrote an email. One single message addressed to Velma, Callista, and Dorian. No subject line, no greeting. Just this. This home was built on trust, preserved by sacrifice, and ruined by betrayal. I don't owe you an apology. I owe myself peace. I kept the receipts. You kept your pride. Only one of us had to let go. Farewell. I stared at the screen for a while before hitting send. No part of me hesitated, no trembling fingers, no second guessing. It was the cleanest goodbye I could offer. And that was it. There was no explosion, no dramatic response, just silence. But it didn't stay quiet for long. Word spread. Beachview was many things, but discreet wasn't one of them. Neighbors started whispering. I overheard Mrs. Dorsey at the bakery telling someone, "That girl, Callista, I thought she was the homeowner. Turns out it was the other one all along, the one who actually lived there." Callista's influencer brand took a hit. A few sponsors pulled out. Her follower count dipped, slowly at first, then more rapidly once the story caught wind in a local Facebook group. Someone leaked the HOA memo and compared it to the sale record. Comments piled up. Family betrayal for clout? Guess heritage doesn't pay the bills. She lied for the likes. Velma, once the reigning queen of Beachview's garden club, started canceling events. No more brunches. No more committee meetings. She claimed she was recovering from a medical issue, but everyone knew. Her face had become a symbol of denial, and her silence, the very thing she used to control us, now exposed her. Dorian stayed quieter than ever. One of the neighbors said they saw him walking alone one morning, shoulders slumped, a grocery bag in each hand. No car, no wedding ring. Just a man who used to sit at the head of the table and say nothing, now living with the aftermath of his silence. Me? I slept. I hadn't realized how deeply unrested I was until I woke up in a new apartment, on a mattress that didn't hold the memory of arguments, no more creaky staircases, no more light switches I installed, no more pretending. I passed the house once, just once, on my way to a meeting downtown. It looked the same from the outside. Same bricks, same flower beds, same front porch swing I'd repainted twice. But it felt hollow now, not because of what they did, but because I was no longer there. Later that week, Ramira and I had lunch at a little diner 2 blocks from her firm. Over coffee, she asked, "Do you regret selling it?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "It was never mine. I just held it together longer than I should have." She smiled. "They underestimated you." I shrugged. Most people do. As we finished lunch, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It read, "You didn't have to do it like that." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They had their narrative. I had my closure. And even then, with justice served, I knew healing wasn't guaranteed. But freedom was. 3 months had passed. Summer had finally begun to creep into the corners of Pittsburgh, warming up cracked sidewalks and coaxing green vines down rusted fences. My apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a modest brick building just past Carson Street. It wasn't glamorous, nothing about it screamed starting over in style, but it was mine. The living room was small but sunlit. I had one armchair, a second-hand couch that creaked when I shifted my weight, and a coffee table made from an old door I found at a flea market. The kitchen was the size of a closet, but I kept it clean, always stocked with strong coffee and 2 mugs, one for me, one just in case. I liked the quiet here. It didn't feel accusatory. It didn't echo with judgments. It let me breathe. There were no photos of my family on the walls, not because I'd erased them out of anger, but because I'd stopped needing the reminder. My phone had gone silent too. No texts from Velma, no voicemails from Dorian, no backhanded check-ins from Callista. And still, I woke up every morning, poured my coffee, and sat at the window. Some mornings I thought about them. Others, I didn't. But the pain hadn't vanished. It just softened, like a scar you stop noticing until something brushes against it. On the Friday of what would have been Grandpa's 90th birthday, I decided to visit Beachview. Not the house. I had no interest in driving past it again, watching Callista's new owners repaint my memories. But I knew someone who still lived 2 doors down, someone who had always offered more honesty in one sentence than my mother ever managed in full conversations. Eldon. He was sitting on his porch like he always did, jeans pressed, shirt tucked in, a mug of tea on the armrest, and his golden retriever curled at his feet. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Been wondering when you'd come back this way," he said, waving me over. I sat in the wooden chair next to him. It creaked under the weight of time, but it held. We didn't speak right away. He passed me the extra mug he'd brewed, unsweetened tea, the way Grandpa liked it. I took a sip and stared out at the street I used to call home. "They painted it blue," Eldon said finally, nodding toward the house. "Yeah," I replied, without looking. "Doesn't suit it," he said. "Some things look prettier when they stay true." I smiled faintly. "They always wanted it to look like something it wasn't." He chuckled. "That they did." Silence settled again, not heavy this time, just full. Eldon leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice softer now. "You know, your grandfather used to sit right here, same spot, every Sunday morning. He'd watch the sun hit the porch just right, and he'd say, 'Only one of them treats this place like home. The rest treat it like shelter.'" I turned toward him. "You never told me that," I said quietly. He nodded. "Didn't think you were ready to hear it then." I stared at the mug in my hands. Guess I spent a long time trying to convince them I belonged. Eldon shook his head gently. "Child, you didn't need to convince anyone. You already did the work. They were the ones pretending they owned what they never built." And with that, the tears came. Not a flood, not dramatic, just quiet drops that slid down my face and soaked the rim of the mug. He didn't say anything more. He just sat beside me, solid and still, the way people do when they understand that grief is not something you fix, but something you witness. When I left an hour later, he squeezed my hand and said, "Don't wait so long next time." Back home, I lit a candle and sat on the floor, letting the quiet wrap around me again. I pulled out the unopened birthday card Dorian had sent last month. No return address, just his slanted handwriting on the envelope. For weeks, I'd let it sit in the drawer, unsure if opening it would bring comfort or more ache. Tonight, I didn't open it either. I just stared at it for a while, then placed it in the back of the drawer. Some bridges you don't burn, but you don't cross them again either. Later that night, I journaled, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote, "I didn't walk away because I was angry. I walked away because I was no longer willing to be invisible. Letting go of my family wasn't a betrayal, it was a survival. I didn't slam the door. They just kept shrinking the space I was allowed to exist in until I had no choice but to leave. I didn't need them to say I was right. I just needed to stop asking them to see me." I stopped writing, exhaled, and leaned back against the couch. The candle flickered nearby, casting long shadows across the ceiling. It was quiet, but it wasn't empty. I still carry the ache. I still wake up some days wondering what version of me they remember, if they remember me at all. But then I get up, I stretch, I pour my coffee, and I start again. Because sometimes the best inheritance isn't property or apologies. It's the freedom to start over, with no one left to prove yourself to. Sometimes the greatest act of strength isn't fighting back with noise, but walking away with dignity, truth, and peace. This wasn't just about a house. It was about reclaiming a voice long silenced and finally setting a boundary that should have been respected from the start. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Or let go of something to finally be free? Share your story in the comments. We want to hear from you. And if you felt something from this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true stories that hit close to home. Hello, my name is Kalia, and my parents canceled my 18th birthday without telling me because my older sister was in a bad mood. They called everyone behind my back, told them not to come, and then let me decorate the backyard by myself, thinking I was hosting a party they had already erased. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing it wasn't the first time they'd written me out of something that should have been mine. My name, my memories, my place in the family. And when I finally spoke up, they tried to destroy what little voice I had left. But someone was watching, someone they didn't expect. What happens when the family golden child isn't golden anymore, and the quiet one stops playing along? I woke up early that morning, too early, if I'm being honest. The house was still quiet, the way it always was just before sunrise in Scottsdale. I stretched beneath my quilt, listening for signs of life. Nothing yet, but that made sense. It was my 18th birthday after all. Maybe they were planning something. Maybe, just maybe, today would be different. Downstairs, I moved on autopilot, trying not to get ahead of myself. I baked the chocolate chip cookies Grandma Winona taught me to make when I was little. The ones we used to eat warm off the tray while sitting barefoot on her porch swing. I arranged them neatly on the platter. Then I hung the string lights I had begged Mom to buy last weekend. The patio already looked like something off Pinterest. I added balloons in soft lavender and white, picked to match the dress I planned to wear tonight, the one I saved for weeks to afford, the one still hanging on my closet door upstairs. My mom joined me around 10, still in her robe, sipping from her Boss Babe mug. She smiled at me, a quick one, not quite reaching her eyes. "Everything's looking good, honey," she said, then disappeared upstairs. Not a word about the guest list, not a word about the plans. And still, I kept busy, cutting lemons for water pitchers, folding napkins, texting friends, just the usual pre-party things. And in the back of my mind, I kept repeating, they haven't forgotten, they know this matters. By 1 in the afternoon, the Arizona heat was climbing, but I didn't mind. I stayed in the shade, checking my phone every few minutes for updates from friends or my cousin Eva, who had promised to help me set up. Nothing. At 3, I went inside and found my mom on the phone, talking in hushed tones. She quickly ended the call when she saw me and smiled again. "Still working on a few things," she said. "Why don't you freshen up? Maybe take a break?" So I did. I went upstairs, laid out my dress, then sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through my phone. Still no texts, no missed calls, just a quiet timeline and the creeping sense that something was off. By 5, the patio was picture perfect, cookies arranged, table set, music playlist ready to go. I even lit the citronella candles around the yard. My phone buzzed. I lunged for it. Just a news alert. At 6:30, I slipped into my dress, light lavender, off the shoulder, with a delicate silver zipper. I had done my own hair, pinned half up, the way I liked it, simple but elegant. I took a deep breath and looked in the mirror. Then I went outside. Still no one. By 7, I was pacing. By 7:30, I was cold even in the desert air. By 8, I stopped checking my phone. By 8:30, I was back in the kitchen, staring at the untouched cookies. At exactly 9 o'clock, I walked into the living room. My parents were there, on the couch, watching Netflix. "You're kidding me," I said. They looked up, startled, as if I had just interrupted a regular Tuesday night. "Where is everyone?" My voice cracked despite my best efforts. "Where is Eva? The Thompsons? Anyone?" Dad paused the show, leaned back, and glanced up the stairs. "Lower your voice," he said, his tone clipped. "You'll wake Sable. She's finally sleeping." That's when I froze. "Sable?" I repeated. "She was supposed to be in LA. "She couldn't fly," Mom added, fidgeting with the remote. "Storms, all flights grounded." I stared at both of them. "So?" "She's been devastated, honey," Mom said. "That trip was important to her." "And my birthday?" I asked. They didn't answer right away. We canceled it, Dad said eventually. It didn't feel right to celebrate with Sable so upset. My head buzzed. So, you canceled my 18th birthday without telling me because my sister was having a bad day? We thought it would be best, Mom said. We didn't want to hurt her feelings. I felt everything in me go still. You let me decorate, bake, set the table. You let me believe. She was inconsolable, Dad interrupted. We were trying to avoid another episode. I looked at them both, sitting on the couch, completely calm. As if what they had done wasn't cruel, as if I was being unreasonable for even questioning it. And you didn't tell me, I said slowly, voice tightening. You didn't even have the decency to say, hey, your party's off because your sister's pouting in her room. Mom shifted uncomfortably. We didn't want to upset you. You seemed excited. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not loud, not explosive, just gone. I looked down at the platter in my hands, the cookies I had baked that morning, now slightly cooled, the chocolate chips no longer glistening. I had made them with hope, with care, for people who didn't even bother to show up because my family told them not to. Even now, I whispered, it's her comfort you guard, not my heartbreak. I stood there, dress pressed and perfect, hands trembling as I set the tray down on the coffee table between us. My parents didn't move. The TV glowed in the background, paused mid-scene. I turned and walked out of the room, my heels clicking softly against the tile. I didn't cry, not then, but something else settled in, something colder, a knowing. And that was the moment I knew. I had never been the daughter worth celebrating. I didn't remember walking up the stairs. I didn't remember setting the tray down or the way my fingers trembled against the edge of the table. What I do remember was the silence, how it followed me like a second skin as I climbed toward my room, the soft creak of the banister, the hum of the ceiling fan in the hallway, the faint scent of lavender from the candle I had lit that morning. All of it felt louder than it should have. I hadn't taken off my shoes yet, even though my heels were killing me. The dress itched around the shoulders, suddenly too tight, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Maybe it never had. I rounded the corner and stepped into the hallway outside my bedroom, and that's when I saw her, Sable, twirling in front of the mirror like she was auditioning for some off-brand fashion vlog, phone in one hand, the other tossing her highlighted hair over her shoulder. She was wearing my dress, the lavender one I'd picked out months ago, the one I'd spent 3 weekends babysitting for, the one I had hung on my closet door this morning, still zipped in its clear garment bag. It was hugging her body like it had always belonged to her. My mouth went dry. I leaned against the doorframe, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. That was supposed to be mine. She turned, glanced at me through the mirror. Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You weren't using it, she said casually. Don't be dramatic. I blinked. She went back to adjusting the neckline. Honestly, you're so lucky I fit into it. I didn't even think it would zip, but... She turned again, showing off her back. Boom! Perfect fit! There was no apology in her tone, no hint of remorse, just that same sugary sharpness she used every time she wanted something that wasn't hers. You knew this was for my party, I said, standing straighter. Sable sighed. Yeah, well, that party's not happening. Mom said you were being weird about everything and didn't want guests. She paused, then added, Frankly, if you were going to mope around and make it awkward for everyone, it's better this way. I didn't answer. Couldn't. She pulled her phone up again. Anyway, my friends are on their way over. Nothing big. Just a chill vibe to help me decompress. I stared at her. You're having a party? I asked. It's not a party, she said quickly. It's a support circle, healing night, self-care. You wouldn't get it. She walked past me without waiting for a response. Her perfume hit me in waves, jasmine, vanilla, the expensive kind she always made Mom buy on their girls' trips to the outlet malls. I followed her into the upstairs den, which had already been redecorated with string lights, the same ones I'd used earlier in the yard. My cookies were now arranged neatly on a tray next to 2 bottles of rosé and a stack of solo cups. There were candles, music playing low from the speaker I'd bought last Christmas. My stomach twisted. I backed away before she could say anything else and returned to my room. There, I sat on the edge of my bed, the hem of my dress now wrinkled beneath me. I pulled out my phone, needing something, anything, to distract myself from the knot forming in my chest. That's when I saw it. Sable had already posted. "Grateful for my real ones," the caption read. "Healing night with the only people that matter. #selfcare. #vibes only." She had posted a photo of herself standing under the lights I'd hung, holding a cookie I had made, in a dress I had earned, surrounded by balloons I had inflated. Behind her, 2 girls I barely recognized were sipping wine and smiling at something outside the frame. My heart didn't drop. It shattered. Quietly, I looked at the timestamp. 5 minutes ago, she had hijacked my birthday, my space, my moment, and turned it into a prop for her self-pity. I locked my phone and tossed it on the bed. My breathing was shallow. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just sat there, blinking at the wall, thinking about all the other times I had been pushed aside like this. Christmas mornings where my gifts were practical, while hers were designer. Family dinners where I served the food and she delivered speeches. School plays where I waited for someone to ask if I was performing, only to be told how proud they were of Sable for letting me be involved. I wasn't invisible. I was background. I got up, walked to the dresser, and opened the drawer where we kept old photo albums. I flipped through them. Birthday parties, graduations, summer vacations. She was always in the center of the frame. I was in the corner, sometimes half-cropped, sometimes blurred. In one group shot, I wasn't in it at all. I had taken the picture. And yet, I had told myself for years that maybe I just hadn't smiled enough. Maybe I didn't speak loudly enough. Maybe I had made myself easy to forget. But that night, something shifted. It wasn't shame I felt. It wasn't even jealousy. It was clarity. I finally understood what they were willing to erase, and why. Because I had never demanded space. I had accepted scraps and convinced myself they were full meals. I had smiled when I felt like screaming, bit my tongue when I should have bitten back. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Laughter floated up from the den. I didn't move. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. Instead, I opened my closet, pulled out my backpack, and started to pack a few things. Not a full suitcase, not yet, but enough. And that was the moment I started remembering everything they wanted me to forget. I didn't sleep much that night. Not out of rage or sadness, but something more hollow. A dull ache that throbbed behind my ribs, too quiet to scream, too deep to ignore. The house was dead silent when I slipped out of bed, the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, but like a warning. I didn't bother changing out of the oversized t-shirt I'd thrown on after tearing off my birthday dress. It was still on the floor, wrinkled and lifeless, like a costume I never got to perform in. I opened my door slowly and stepped into the hallway. The walls were lined with family portraits, Mom's pride and joy. Every holiday, every milestone, every curated moment of Monroe family unity had been captured and framed here like a museum exhibit. I started at the far end, near the photo from our trip to Disney World. I had been 11. Sable had her arms flung around both parents, beaming with mouse ears on her head. I was in the back, holding our backpack, squinting against the sun. You could barely see me behind Dad's shoulder. Next was Christmas 2 years ago. Sable in a red sequin dress, front and center. I was to the left, cropped at the edge, mid-blink, like an afterthought they'd kept in out of obligation. Graduation. Hers, not mine. She stood alone in her cap and gown, Mom and Dad on either side, hands on her shoulders. I had taken the photo. I moved down the hallway slowly, studying every frame, vacation photos where I was holding the camera, birthday parties where I wasn't visible, school events where my name was left out of the caption on Facebook. They always said I was low maintenance, I whispered to no one. Turns out, I was low visibility. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and picked up my phone. Notifications were still coming in from Sable's post, her healing night with my cookies, my dress, my decorations. I hadn't looked at any of the comments earlier. Now I did. Queen energy as always. You deserve it, babe. Don't let toxic people ruin your shine. So glad you finally cut out the negative energy in your life. Negative energy? Was that me? I checked my messages. A few unopened texts from Eva, one from my friend Rachel, another from Ryan. I opened Rachel's first. Hey girl, I hope you're okay. Your mom told us not to come because you were dealing with something emotional. We didn't want to make it worse. Then Ryan. Sorry we bailed. We thought you were in a rough place and needed space. Didn't want to overstep. Then Eva. Kalia, I'm so sorry. I was ready to drive down, but your mom called and said you canceled the party yourself. Are you okay? My fingers trembled as I read and reread those messages. I hadn't canceled anything. I hadn't told anyone to stay away. My parents had done it for me. They didn't just cancel my birthday, they rewrote the script entirely. They made me the unstable one, the recluse, the girl who couldn't handle a party, the girl who should be pitied, not celebrated. They planned my absence like it was damage control, I said under my breath. I turned off my phone, set it face down on my nightstand, and stared at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying every moment over the past few months. Sable crying because her brand collaboration fell through. Mom whispering that I shouldn't post my art account too much because it might make your sister feel like she's not the only creative one. Dad telling me, in his calm, rational voice, that it's just easier to go along with her sometimes. And me, always stepping aside, always apologizing for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. My throat tightened. I swallowed, but it didn't help. My eyes burned, and before I realized it, tears were slipping silently down my cheeks. Not loud sobs, just quiet grief, the kind that doesn't ask for comfort because it knows none is coming. I curled my knees to my chest and buried my face in the blanket, letting it all rise up. The unfairness, the years of being invisible, the constant shape-shifting to fit into a space that was never meant for me. All of it. Eventually, I sat up and wiped my face. I looked around my room, at the string lights, still unlit. The gift bag on the desk from myself to me, still unopened. The single balloon floating in the corner, drifting near the ceiling like it hadn't gotten the memo. I exhaled. Then I stood up and pulled my duffel bag from under the bed. I wasn't running away, I was opting out. I started small. A couple of t-shirts, my favorite hoodie, a pair of jeans, my journal, the photo I had of Grandma Winona tucked into a frame on my nightstand, toothbrush, headphones, a spare charger, essentials only, no drama, no note on the pillow, no slammed doors, just space, just enough to remind myself that I was still a person, not a supporting character in someone else's story. Down the hallway, I heard laughter again. Sable and her friends were still downstairs, still sipping from my solo cups, still basking under the lights I'd strung with my own hands. I zipped the bag, slowly. I sat down beside it, arms wrapped around my knees. If I was invisible in their world, maybe I needed to leave it all together. I hadn't left yet. I'd sat with my bag for what felt like hours, unmoving, numb, my body still but my thoughts louder than any noise the house could make. The hallway, once familiar, now felt like a waiting room for something I couldn't name. I hadn't packed for a destination, only for distance. I had replayed every word from last night on a loop. The dismissal, the lies, the party that wasn't. My parents hadn't knocked once to check on me. Sable, of course, had no reason to. She was too busy posting more pictures in my dress, under my lights, laughing like she was grieving a war I had caused. Around 4 that afternoon, the house grew eerily still. The guests had long since left. The air hung thick with whatever unspoken mess they refused to clean up. I stayed by the front door, bag beside me, heart pounding but strangely steady. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay here. That much had finally settled inside me like a truth I no longer had to argue with. When the doorbell rang, I flinched. Nobody moved. I waited. Once, twice. 5 seconds, and still no sound from upstairs. No one even leaned over the railing to call out, "Can you get that?" the way they normally did when it was food delivery or a neighbor, just that loaded silence. So I got up and opened it, and there he was, Grandpa Ellison. He stood there in a pressed button-down and khakis, like he'd just come from one of his Sunday bridge games. In his left hand, a small brown paper bag, the kind he always brought when he brought oranges from his backyard tree. He looked me in the eye, not past me, not around me, directly at me. "Something told me I should stop by," he said. Calm, even, as if this were the most normal day in the world. I couldn't speak for a second. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Not since our last brunch where Sable monopolized the conversation, and I smiled politely like always. Not since he slid me a $20 under the table and whispered, "For that sketchbook you mentioned." "You're just in time," I finally said, stepping aside. He walked in and placed the bag on the entryway table. His eyes took in the scene quickly, the duffel bag, my bare feet, the way my face probably looked like I hadn't slept in a day. "Where's your father?" he asked. "Probably watching TV," I answered. "Same as last night." Ellison didn't nod or comment. He just started walking toward the living room. I followed him down the hallway, each footstep a little sharper than the last. When we turned the corner, sure enough, there they were. Dad on the recliner, Mom curled up on the couch, both half watching something on Netflix like we hadn't just had a familial meltdown. Dad muted the television when he saw us. "Dad," he said, a little too cheerfully. "What a surprise." "Is it?" Grandpa asked. Mom stood up, brushing non-existent crumbs off her lap. "We didn't expect you today." "I imagine you didn't." He didn't sit yet. He just stood there, letting the pause settle into something uncomfortable. Then, "Why was Kaylia's birthday canceled?" Mom and Dad exchanged a glance that barely lasted a breath, but it was enough. Enough to tell me they hadn't rehearsed for this. "Well, it's not that simple," Mom started. "It's very simple," he cut in. "Your daughter turned 18. There was supposed to be a party. I was told it was happening. I set money aside for it. Yet here I am, arriving the day after, and your youngest granddaughter looks like she hasn't slept, while your eldest has posted 17 photos from what appears to be a private event featuring party lights, balloons, and cookies." Mom opened her mouth, closed it. Dad cleared his throat. "She had a meltdown," Dad said. "Sable?" "Her trip to LA got canceled and she was devastated." "So the party was canceled," Grandpa said flatly, "for her." "We didn't want to hurt either of them," Mom offered weakly. It felt unfair to celebrate when Sable was so emotionally fragile. Grandpa finally sat down in the armchair across from them, leaning forward slightly. "And did you tell Kaylia?" he asked. Silence. "No," I said for them. "They let me bake, decorate, set everything up, and then, when no one showed up, I found them in here, watching a movie, like it was just another Friday." Grandpa looked back at them. "You didn't even tell her?" "We were trying to avoid upsetting her more," Dad muttered. Ellison exhaled, then leaned back. "Interesting." Mom tried again. "We love both our girls." "You fund both your girls?" he interrupted, voice still cool. They both froze. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "Bank transfer receipts." "For the last 3 years," he said evenly, "I've been supporting this family. Quietly, monthly, no questions asked, because I believed you were trying, because I thought you were raising 2 strong, good women who loved and respected each other. Now I'm wondering if you've just been raising one and erasing the other." Mom's eyes welled up instantly. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Let me ask you this," he continued. "If I hadn't shown up today, would you have told me about any of this? About the canceled party? About the photos I saw online this morning? About your daughter packing her things to leave this house?" Dad tried to speak, but Grandpa held up a hand. "No more spin, no more excuses. You took her milestone birthday and threw it out to protect the feelings of someone who's already been given everything. And I know because I paid for it." Silence again. Thick. Heavy. Finally, he turned to me. "I'm heading back to my place," he said. "You're welcome to come with me, Kaylia. I can't undo what's been done, but I can offer you a clean room, a quiet space, and a door that locks." I didn't cry. I exhaled. My parents didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, letting the weight of it sit like furniture they didn't know how to rearrange. Grandpa stood, looked back one last time. "I can't force you to come with me," he said gently, "but I am going home now." I grabbed my bag, not quickly, not in a flurry, just decisively, and I followed him out. I didn't look back as I walked through that door, but I heard them start to panic behind me. The car ride to Grandpa's house was quiet. Not the awkward, heavy kind, just quiet in the way peace sounds after chaos. I kept my eyes on the road, fingers gently resting on the strap of my duffel bag. Grandpa didn't ask questions. He didn't push. He just drove, humming something low under his breath like it was another ordinary Sunday, and not the day I'd walked out of the only home I'd ever known. We got to his house just before sunset. The air smelled like rosemary and dust. I remember noticing how everything inside felt still but not stagnant. Books lined the living room wall, real ones, with cracked spines and worn corners. The kind you don't just display to look smart. He had framed court documents, photos with clients, and one black and white picture of Grandma Winona in front of a courthouse, holding a gavel like it was her own weapon of choice. I showered, ate half a sandwich. Then I went to sleep without checking my phone. The next morning, I woke up in a bed that creaked slightly when I rolled over. It was a simple room, a wide window, a wooden dresser, no TV. Just stillness, the kind that doesn't demand anything from you. There was a faint scent of oranges coming from the kitchen. I followed it. Grandpa was already at the table, slicing fruit onto a plate beside a steaming mug of black coffee. He didn't look up right away, just gestured to the tea kettle and said, "You take it with honey or lemon?" "Both," I answered. He poured without another word, handed me a cup, then went back to peeling the last orange with surgical precision. That was how he gave me space, without asking, without performing sympathy, just by letting me be. I sat down across from him, letting the tea warm my hands. "This house," I said, glancing around, "it doesn't feel like it whispers behind your back." He looked up, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. "It doesn't pretend to welcome you while wondering why you're here." He nodded, then popped a slice of orange into his mouth and chewed thoughtfully. "That's because it doesn't." A small, uninvited laugh escaped my throat. Just a breath. But it was the first in days. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. But I told him enough, about the canceled party, the social media posts, the lies told to my friends. And when I was done, he didn't interrupt or jump in with advice. He just refilled my cup and said, "So what's your next move?" That question stayed with me all afternoon. I sat in his study for most of the day, surrounded by quiet old case files and the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Around 3 o'clock, I pulled out my phone and opened a blank message screen. To Mom and Dad. Message, "If Sable doesn't move out, don't contact me again." I didn't add emojis, no threats, no explanations, just that. I stared at the message for a minute, then hit send. Not because I thought it would change anything, but because I needed it documented. Not for them, for me. A receipt of self-respect. I set my phone face down on the desk. They wouldn't choose me, not over her, but I already knew that. I had always been the easier one to lose. That night, after dinner, Grandpa asked if I wanted to help him dig through some of Grandma's old things in the den. He said he was trying to finally clean out her desk, something he'd put off for years. We went through boxes of cards, newspaper clippings, recipe books. Then he opened the small top drawer, the one with the lock. He held the key like it was something sacred, turning it slowly before opening the drawer. From the very back, wrapped in a piece of faded lace, he pulled out a velvet box. "I meant to give this to you a while ago," he said, handing it to me. "But I kept thinking your mother would—" His voice trailed off. He didn't finish the sentence. I opened the box. Inside was a necklace, delicate silver, with a charm shaped like a crescent moon. I didn't recognize it, not from photos, not from memory, but it felt like something I should have had all along. She bought that for you the day after you were born, Grandpa said. Your mom didn't want it distracting Sable when she was little. Said she was going through a clingy phase and might throw a fit if she thought you were getting special attention. I blinked, staring at the charm. She kept it hidden all this time? He shrugged. It wasn't mine to give back, until now. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with the realization that someone had seen me, even when I was a newborn, even when no one else wanted me seen. She saw me, I whispered, even if they erased me later. Grandpa didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I closed the box and held it to my chest for a moment. Later that night, in the mirror of the guest bathroom, I put the necklace on. It wasn't just jewelry, it was proof. Proof that I wasn't a mistake or an accessory or a second draft of someone more important. Proof that someone, once, looked at me and thought, she deserves something beautiful. My reflection caught in the mirror, not as a kid or a shadow, but as a young woman who had stopped waiting for approval. I'd sent my terms, and now I was waiting for their mistake. The email came on a Thursday morning, 5 days after I moved in with Grandpa. I had just finished sweeping the back patio, wiping the red dust from the edges of the wrought iron chairs he liked to sit on after dinner. I had my phone plugged in on the kitchen counter, music playing softly through the speaker. James Taylor, one of Grandpa's favorites. It was the first morning I'd felt truly steady since walking out of that house. Then it vibrated. Once, twice, a third time. I dried my hands on the dish towel and picked it up, expecting it to be Nico, maybe a text from Eva. Instead, it was a screenshot. The top of the image read, regarding Kalia. Underneath, in painfully familiar font, was an email thread. From mom@elstonhousehold.com to extended family list, friends list, school board contact. Subject, clarification regarding Kalia's current status. I didn't even open the message right away. I just stood there, thumb hovering over the image, my gut already telling me what it was. They didn't reply to my message. That was already the answer. But I hadn't expected this. I finally zoomed in. It was a carefully written essay of preemptive damage control, not from concern, not from love, but from fear. Fear of what I might say, of what I might do next. They claimed I had been struggling with emotional dysregulation, that I had been acting out in ways that deeply concerned the family. They wrote that I had become volatile after years of trying to find my identity and that they were working closely with professionals to support me. They also included a line that made me go cold. We believe Grandpa Ellison means well, but his strong personality has made Kalia more reactive in recent weeks. Reactive. They were trying to paint me as unstable, dangerous even, and him as manipulative. No one from that list had seen me cry in years. No one had ever witnessed me lose my temper. But they had written it all down like it was fact, strategic, believable, and just vague enough to sound reasonable. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a hit piece. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, letting the phone rest in my palm, my heart pacing hard but quiet. So this was it. Their move. Not a conversation, not a phone call. A digital character assassination sent to everyone who might eventually hear my side. They were scared. This wasn't about protecting me, this was about controlling the narrative. They said it first, so they could make whatever I said next look like retaliation. This is fear, I whispered to myself. They're scared of what I'll say, so they said it first. I didn't cry. I didn't text back. I just closed the screenshot, saved it to a new folder I labeled Receipts, and sat in the stillness. Later that afternoon, when Grandpa got home from his usual chess game at the rec center, he found me in the study, phone in hand, staring blankly at the wall. "Something happen?" he asked, setting down his keys. I handed him the phone. He read it silently. His face didn't move, but I could see the muscle in his jaw twitch once. He didn't say anything for a while, just handed it back to me and walked to the kitchen. When he returned, he had a manila envelope in his hand. "Print it out," he said simply. "Put it in here. Never know what we might need down the line." That was the only reaction he gave. No outrage, no explosion, just strategy, I followed suit. That night I couldn't sleep, not because of the email, but because of what it reminded me of, things I'd been trying not to remember. The voice memos. I had dozens of old recordings on my phone, notes to self, snippets of Sable's rants I'd saved to use in art projects, and one that I hadn't listened to in years. I scrolled until I found it. The timestamp read, March 8, 2017. It started in the background of the kitchen. I was 12. Mom's voice was low but clear. Don't let her wear red. It clashes with Sable's palette. A pause. The shuffle of dishes. Then again. She can't be too happy. It'll make Sable feel worse. Let her sit this one out. 12-year-old me had recorded that by accident while doodling in the corner with my phone in my hoodie pocket. Back then, I hadn't understood it. I thought it was about clothes, about colors. But listening now, as a young woman who had just been declared a threat to her own family's image, it meant something else entirely. My whole life had been curated to complement someone else's spotlight. I played the clip again, slower. She can't be too happy. That wasn't parenting. That was emotional conditioning. I set the phone down, walked to the mirror, and stared at myself. My skin looked tired. My eyes, flat. But under that, I saw something else. Not weakness, awareness. I was a shadow they dressed like wallpaper, I murmured. Pretty, quiet, just enough to match the room. But I wasn't going to stay stuck on their walls anymore. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I didn't wait for breakfast. I didn't check my phone. I went straight to Grandpa's study and opened my laptop. I created a new document. Blank. Clean. The cursor blinked. And for the first time, I didn't blink back. I started typing. One sentence, then another. Not for revenge, not for attention, but because they thought they could write my story for me. They forgot I know how to write too. The words didn't come all at once. They arrived slowly, like rain on a windshield. Uncertain, uneven, but relentless. At first, I just stared at the blinking cursor. It was easier to focus on that little line than to confront the truth in my head. I'd spent most of my life holding it all in. Now, I had to let it pour out. It was a week after I left. A full 7 days of silence from my parents, radio static from Sable. 7 days of no apologies, no clarifications, just the email smear campaign they launched behind my back. And then, the memo Grandpa found in his inbox. He'd walked into the kitchen holding his phone like it smelled bad. Looks like your mom copied me by accident, he said, placing it on the table in front of me. At first glance, it looked like a rough draft. Some lines were highlighted in yellow, others had little comments in the margins, clearly meant to be reviewed before publishing. The subject line? Contingency statement, if Kalia speaks publicly. And it only got worse from there. Phrases like, emphasize concern for her emotional instability. Reframe as a family misunderstanding, position Sable as supportive. Mention long-standing financial stress to explain temporary withdrawal of birthday support. I couldn't even finish reading before I pushed the phone away. They don't want reconciliation, I said, more to myself than to Grandpa. They want damage control. He nodded. They're not worried about your voice. They're worried about losing their image. It was quiet for a moment. Then I looked at him, steady. Then let's give them something they can't control. That night, I stayed up in his study. He offered to help, but I needed to do this alone. I opened a clean document and typed the title, The Child Who Was Never Picked. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. Anyone who knew us would know who I meant. And those who didn't? They'd recognize the pattern anyway, because I wasn't alone. I knew that now. I wrote for hours about the party that never happened, the dress my sister stole, the lights I strung for guests who never came, the silence, the years of being told to make room, to tone it down, to wait my turn, a turn that never arrived. I included the messages from friends who were told I canceled. I mentioned the voice memo I'd kept for years, my mother saying not to let me wear red because it would throw off Sable's aesthetic. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I simply told the truth. You don't know what it's like to grow up in a house where your happiness is a threat, I wrote. where your milestones are minimized and your silence is applauded, so long as it keeps things peaceful for everyone else. I paused after that line, let the truth of it settle into the page. I wasn't the angry one, I continued. I was the ignored one who finally spoke. By sunrise, the letter was done. I uploaded it to my old art blog, the one I hadn't updated since junior year. I shared the link to the alumni page from my private school, the same one my mother still used to coordinate events and show off photos of Sable's influencer campaigns. Then I closed the laptop and went outside. The desert air was cold that morning. Still, like the moment before a storm, when the sky holds its breath. I stood barefoot on the porch and waited. I didn't have to wait long. By mid-morning, my phone started buzzing. A comment here, a message there, then more. Dozens, then hundreds. People from school, from church, former teachers, distant cousins, strangers. Some left messages like, I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying what I never could. This was me. Every word. Others were angrier. At my family. At the culture that lets it happen. She's brave. They should be ashamed. You don't raise a daughter just to erase her. By lunchtime, the post had been shared over 3,000 times. Someone even turned part of it into a graphic quote and posted it on Instagram. I wasn't the angry one. I was the ignored one who finally spoke. It had 20,000 likes within an hour. And then came the emails. Not to me, to them. I found out from Eva. She sent me a screenshot. Subject line, this is what you raised? Apparently, one of our aunts, one who used to host 4th of July cookouts, had forwarded the letter back to my mother with a curt note. Explains a lot. Another one read, you owe her more than silence. You owe her truth. I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. Just seen. I hadn't named them. But people recognized the type. The emails from my parents came later that night. First, my father. Kalia, call me. We need to talk about this post. This is not fair to your mother. Then my mother. Sweetheart, we understand you're hurting, but this wasn't the way to handle it. You've embarrassed the family. And finally, Sable. Wow. So you're the victim now? I didn't reply. I didn't owe them that. What they wanted was a reaction. What they feared was my silence. Not the kind I used to give, the kind that gave them space to lie, but the kind that comes after the truth has already been told. I stepped outside again, phone still buzzing in my hand. The porch light was still on from the night before. I hadn't noticed it earlier. It flickered slightly in the breeze. Grandpa had gone to bed hours ago, after reading the letter in full, saying only, you wrote like someone who knows how to survive. I sat on the porch steps, scrolling through the comments one last time. And then the screen lit up again. Dad, Mom, Sable. Call after call after call. I let them ring. They taught me to stay quiet. But I learned that silence doesn't protect you. It just gives them time to sharpen the knife. A month passed. It wasn't slow, like you'd expect grief to be, and it wasn't fast either. It moved with a strange rhythm. Quiet mornings with Grandpa, evenings filled with chess matches, and occasional moments where I caught myself forgetting I had ever lived in another house. But then came graduation. I wasn't nervous. Not in the usual way. There was nothing left for me to prove to them. This day wasn't about their pride or their presence. It was mine. And finally, that meant something. Backstage at Chaparral High, I stood in my cap and gown, holding my diploma folder with hands that had steadied over the last few weeks. My name was already called. I had crossed the stage to polite applause and one loud whistle from Grandpa Ellison, who sat in the front row, perfectly straight, with his signature navy tie and a quiet fire in his eyes. There were 2 empty seats beside him, reserved signs still taped to the backs. They had RSVP'd. Of course they had. Publicly, they had to save face. But when the lights dimmed and the graduates processed in, those chairs stayed vacant, unclaimed, and somehow, that felt right. Better even. I didn't realize how deeply I needed their absence until I saw the empty chairs holding more honesty than their presence ever did. After the ceremony, I found Grandpa waiting in the shaded courtyard behind the auditorium, standing alone beneath a palm tree. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't checking his watch, just waiting, like he knew I'd need a minute to take it all in. "You looked calm up there," he said as I approached. I felt calm. Not everyone gets that on a day like today. "I didn't have to look for anyone in the crowd," I told him. That helped. He handed me a small white envelope. His eyes never left mine. "I thought you should see this now." I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet, one of those official notarized documents with gold seals and thick paper. At the top, "Last Will and Testament, Amendment." I scanned quickly until I saw it. Sable Kerrigan Elston, removed from all financial inheritance effective immediately. Cause cited, failure to uphold ethical representation of family interest. I swallowed hard. "She didn't see that coming," I murmured. "She thought being the favorite meant she couldn't fall," Grandpa said quietly. "Turns out, she just never looked down." I folded the paper and slid it back into the envelope, my chest strangely still. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gravity. We walked in silence toward the parking lot, passing clusters of families taking photos in matching outfits. Laughter, camera flashes, squeals of pride. It all formed a soft backdrop, not quite reaching us. And then, I saw her. Sable. She stood near the side exit, overdressed in a tight blush pink dress and heels too high for a school gymnasium. She clutched her phone in one hand and a Starbucks cup in the other, scanning the crowd like she had been waiting there all along. When she spotted me, her posture changed, more poised, less casual. "Kalia," she called out, her voice sugary and loud enough to attract attention. "Let's take one picture, just one." I kept walking, but she followed, heels clicking sharply on the concrete. "Come on," she said again, smile tight but practiced. "Just for Mom. Just for appearances." I stopped, turned, met her eyes fully for the first time in weeks. "No." She blinked, thrown off by how flat my voice was. "No? You've never wanted me in the frame," I said. "Let's not fake it now." Her smile faltered. "We're still family," she said quickly, voice faltering just slightly. "What's one picture?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped to the side as a photographer passed, snapping pictures of another graduate. I motioned subtly for him to go ahead, and he did, capturing Sable, alone, standing too stiffly, smiling too hard. She looked back at me, stunned, and I turned away. As we walked toward the car, I could feel the weight shift around us. People had seen. Teachers, classmates, extended family who had made the drive. Even the school principal looked our way as we passed. There was no shouting, no slamming doors, just a moment suspended between truth and consequence. Grandpa opened the passenger door for me. I slipped in without a word. As he started the engine, he glanced over. "Any regrets?" I looked out the window, watching as Sable stood frozen, phone still in hand, smile fading like a mask losing shape. "Only that I didn't speak sooner," I said. Then I paused, but then again, I wasn't ready. And I think, maybe it wasn't just me who needed to heal. The drive to Flagstaff took just under 2 hours, most of it in silence. Grandpa insisted on taking me up himself, even though I'd offered to Uber. "You don't send a kid off to build a new life by tapping an app," he said, handing me a thermos of coffee at dawn like it was some kind of rite of passage. We didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't empty. It was familiar. Safe. The trees grew taller as we climbed north, the desert slowly giving way to pines and cooler air. I sat with my window cracked slightly, letting the scent of the forest fill the car, and I watched as the heat haze of home disappeared in the rearview mirror. When we pulled into the campus, I didn't expect to feel anything in particular, but I did. Not excitement, not nerves, just a deep, undeniable sense that I was exactly where I needed to be. Inside the admissions building, I signed the final paperwork. A simple form to finalize my student status, tucked in among financial aid confirmations and ID photos. At the bottom was a section labeled Legal name verification. I took a deep breath and carefully printed, Kalia Winona Rourke. The woman at the desk glanced up with a gentle smile. That's a beautiful name. I nodded. It's my grandmother's. And just like that, it was official. I didn't keep the name that left me off every birthday card. I didn't carry the name that only existed to frame someone else in perfect lighting. I chose mine, every letter of it. Later, as I unpacked in my small dorm room, I found a place for just one framed photo, me and Grandpa standing outside the courthouse on the day the name change became real. I was wearing a flannel and ripped jeans. He wore a collared shirt and the proudest look I'd ever seen on his face. I texted Nico. Settled. Feels weird, but good weird. He replied with a thumbs up and a meme about overpriced textbooks. It made me smile. I didn't need a tribe. I didn't need a scene. I just needed room, my name, my story. That night, Grandpa and I had dinner at a quiet diner near campus. He ordered meatloaf. I got the same, just to make it easy. We sat in the corner booth, sipping root beer and watching a couple in their 70s argue lovingly over how many napkins to stuff in their pockets before leaving. He cleared his throat midway through the meal. There's one more thing I need to tell you, he said, not meeting my eyes. I waited. When your mother found out she was pregnant with you, he began, she was not in a good place. Your grandmother and I had just come back from burying her parents. It was a rough year. He paused, then looked up. She wanted to give you up. Said it was a sign of bad timing. Too much grief. Too much chaos. But your grandmother put her foot down. She told her, this one stays. And so you did. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. That makes a lot of sense now, I said softly. He nodded, not apologetic, not defensive, just truthful. We didn't talk about it further. We didn't need to, because I finally understood the distance, the undercurrent, the way my mother always seemed a little off when she looked at me, like she was trying to feel something that wouldn't come. 2 days later, after Grandpa had driven back to Scottsdale, I received a letter in my dorm mailbox. No return address. I recognized the handwriting. I held the envelope for a long time before sliding it into the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't open it. Some things don't need to be reopened just because they arrive sealed. My classes started the following week. Psychology, ethics, creative writing, the usual freshman slate, but I walked those halls with more than books in my backpack. I carried a name I had chosen, a story I had written, a silence I had broken. And one afternoon, as I crossed the quad alone, I looked up at the sky and whispered a quiet truth I never thought I'd say out loud. I wasn't saved. I just left. There was no dramatic rescue, no apology that made it all better, just the quiet act of stepping away from what was killing me and choosing something, anything, else. And sometimes, that's enough. They erased my birthday, but they didn't erase me. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love us the most are the very ones who erase us little by little, until we have no choice but to rewrite our own story. This wasn't just a story about a ruined birthday. It was about reclaiming your place, your voice, and your worth, even when your own family refuses to see it. What about you? Have you ever been the invisible one in your own home? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life family stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters.